Hi guys, and welcome to Calm Night Radio Channel. Tonight we step into a year when the air itself seems restless, when church bells, courthouse speeches, and the dull rattle of drums can pull an ordinary man away from a field, a shop, or a family table. You stand in 1862 with war no longer sounding distant or romantic, and the question hangs over everything. What does it actually feel like to become a soldier when the nation is tearing itself apart? What kind of hunger, pride, fear, or simple boredom carries you from home into uniform? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while you are here, comment below with your location and local time. Now, dim the lights and let the road beneath your boots carry you into a world of brass buttons, muddy camp roads, and uneasy courage, where patriotism sounds stirring in daylight and much less certain after dark. You are not born a soldier. You are made into one by pressure, noise, and timing. In 1862, that timing matters. The war has already torn through towns and newspapers for months. It is no longer a shouting match at the post office. It is real now. Names of battles pass from mouth to mouth with a heavy seriousness, and every fresh casualty list lands like a stone in a pond. If you live in the North, you may hear speeches about preserving the Union, crushing rebellion, and proving that Republican government can survive a civil war. If you live in the South, you hear just as much certainty spoken in a different key, wrapped in ideas of home defense, independence, and honor. Either way, the language around you is grand. The actual road under your feet is much less grand. It is dusty, rutted, and usually smells faintly of horse. You might enlist because your neighbours have already done it. That reason sounds shallow, but it is one of the strongest. A village can lean on a man without ever placing a hand on him. Men watch who steps forward and who does not. Shopkeepers remember. Sweethearts remember. Mothers try not to show fear, but they remember too. Even silence can feel like accusation. Maybe you join for conviction. Maybe you believe deeply in your side. Maybe you're swept up by a brass band and a flag moving in the wind. Maybe you're 20, healthy, and reckless enough to confuse danger with purpose. Maybe you're older than that and tired of listening to boys talk about battle as if it were a county fair. Maybe the enlistment bounty helps. Cash has a persuasive voice. Historians still argue about how much ideology mattered compared with the local pressure, steady wages, and the plain desire not to seem cowardly. The recruiting rally has its own theatre. A speaker climbs a platform, usually with dramatic pauses and a voice large enough for the back row. He promises duty, sacrifice, destiny, and perhaps a quick campaign. That last promise ages badly. Beside him stands an officer or a local notable, his clothes cleaner than yours, his confidence almost suspiciously polished. Drums roll, a banner flaps, children stare. Someone cheers too early. Someone else cries without wanting to be seen. You feel the crowd before you make the choice. Bodies press close. Wool sleeves brush your arm. Boots grind dirt into the square. The smell is a thick mixture of tobacco smoke, damp coats, horse sweat, and human anticipation. It is oddly festive. That is the dangerous part. A war can disguise itself as an outing for a few bright minutes. When you step forward, it may happen quickly. 1 second you're watching, the next you are in a line of men giving names, ages, and the occupations. Farmer, clerk, blacksmith, teacher, printer, teamster, student, carpenter. The list itself tells the story. Armies are built from whatever a society is lying around. A nation at war simply empties its pockets onto the table. You do not necessarily look impressive. Civil War volunteers are not sculpted parade models. They arrive with crooked hats, mismatched boots, uncertain posture, and expressions ranging from thrilled to faintly seasick. Some are teenagers pretending to be older. Some are old enough to know better. Quite a few have never been farther from home than the next county. Yet this ragged beginning is how armies begin, with paperwork, optimism, and several men who seem already prepared to complain about food they have not even received. The medical examination is one of the first rude surprises. It can be brief, blunt, and not especially dignified. A surgeon or examining officer checks teeth, limbs, chest, eyesight, and general sturdiness. Standards vary, needs vary too. In practice, plenty of men with imperfect health get through. Armies in 1862 are not exactly boutique establishments. If you can stand, march, and hold a musket, someone may decide you are close enough to excellent. Then comes the oath. This is the moment when the noise in your head briefly sharpens into a line. Words matter here. Spoken aloud, they turn a public mood into a private bond. You swear loyalty and service, and perhaps for the first time the whole thing settles in your stomach with a little weight. A speech can be borrowed from the crowd, an oath belongs to you. Once you're accepted, the first sensation is often not glory but separation. Home begins to drift even before you leave it. Familiar rooms look different when you know you are about to walk away from them. A chair by the hearth is suddenly too ordinary to ignore. Bread on the table smells richer. A sibling's joke feels more precious than it did yesterday. Even the creak of a floorboard can seem tender. Goodbyes in 1862 are rarely elegant. They're awkward, practical, and deeply human. A father may offer advice instead of affection because advice is easier to control. A mother smooths your collar or presses food into your hand, as if a biscuit might shield you from artillery. A wife might try to speak plainly and fail halfway through the sentence. Children often do not understand the scale of departure, which somehow makes it harder. Some men leave with ceremony, others leave in a wagon before sunrise, because slipping away early is kinder than tearing the bandage off slowly in public. You climb aboard or fall into line, and the distance between you and your old life begins with the most ordinary sounds. Wheel rims creak, harness chains clink, someone coughs, chickens scratch in a yard. The world does not pause to mark your transformation. Very rude of it. Really, travel to camp can feel like a strange in-between state. You're no longer quite civilian, but not yet convincingly military either. On a train, you may sit shoulder to shoulder with men who will soon know your habits, your temper, and the exact sound of your snoring. The carriage smells of coal smoke, stale clothes, apples, pipe tobacco, and nervous sweat. Outside the window, farms slide by with an almost insulting calm. At stations, crowds gather, women wave handkerchiefs, boys run alongside, vendors sell snacks. Patriotic songs break out, sometimes beautifully, sometimes with enough wrong notes to qualify as a new form of warfare. Strangers treat you with sudden importance because the uniform, or even the promise of it, changes how they see you. It is flattering. It is also a little unreal. If you travel by boat, the sensations shift. River air feels damp on your face. Ropes groan. Steam whistles shriek. Water slaps the hull with a sleepy rhythm that would be relaxing if not for the fact that everyone around you is trying to look braver than he feels. Some recruits get seasick or riversick almost immediately. So much for martial grandeur. Nothing humbles a future hero quite like leaning over a rail and reconsidering all his life choices. By 1862, many communities have already sent earlier companies to war, so you're not stepping into innocence. You hear stories. Veterans home on furlough speak with a different tone from the recruiting officers. They talk about blisters, hunger, rain, sickness, and confusion. Sometimes they talk about battle, but often only in fragments. That can be more unsettling than a full tale. Silence has a way of suggesting depths you do not want measured. The newspapers help and do not help. They print reports, rumours, casualty numbers, and proud language that can turn one muddy skirmish into something Homeric. Yet letters from actual soldiers bring other details. Lice, bad coffee, wet blankets, long waits, sudden terror. One quirky tidbit from camp life appears again and again in soldiers' accounts. Men become astonishingly invested in tiny pets and mascots. A regiment might adopt a dog, a raccoon, or even a goat with more ceremony than it applies to military discipline. Humans, as it turns out, can carry absurdity anywhere. As a new recruit, you start learning who the others are. Every company contains types that appear almost by natural law. There is the loud enthusiast who expects to be in the enemy capital by autumn. There is the quiet man who rarely jokes and somehow seems older than his years. There is the chronic grumbler who finds fault with roads, weather, officers, bread, and perhaps the moon. There is the natural clown, essential to morale and probably impossible to trust with serious instructions. You listen for accents and hear a map of the country in miniature. Rural drawls sit beside city sharpness. Immigrants speak in German, Irish cadences, or other tones that make the camp sound bigger than the county where it stands. Ethnic regiments, especially in the north, may preserve language and custom even while serving a national cause. Food preferences, songs, jokes, and tempers travel with the men. An army is never just an army. It is a crowded museum of habits. Your first camp in 1862 may be little more than open ground with some tents, wagons, and officers trying to impose order on chaos. The place has a new smell every hour. Morning brings dew, smoke, and cold earth. Midday adds trampled grass, leather, sweat, and mule. Evening introduces beans, bacon grease, wood fire, and whatever else 100 men can accidentally create by existing too close together. It is not elegant, it is memorable. The first night can feel surprisingly lonely. That seems strange when you are surrounded by other recruits, yet loneliness does not require solitude. It only requires unfamiliarity. You lie on rough bedding, maybe wrapped in a blanket that scratches your neck, listening to coughing, muttered prayers, distant laughter, and the restless shift of men who cannot quite settle. Someone tells a story in the dark, someone else snores like faulty machinery. Somewhere a sentry paces, boots pressing a quiet rhythm into the dirt. You think of home then, not in heroic images, in textures, the worn edge of a table, the smell of soap in a washroom, rain on a roof, you know, the exact weight of a door latch in your hand. War, for all its slogans, begins with the loss of small familiar things, and still, beneath the homesickness, another feeling stirs, curiosity, a strange alertness. You're entering a new social world with rules you do not yet understand. Who gets promoted? Who breaks under strain? Who can make a joke when spirits sink? Who steals? Who shares? Who prays? Who boasts? You begin studying men because your comfort, and perhaps your life, may eventually depend on them. There is also vanity. Let us be fair to history. Many recruits care very much about how they look. The first issue of clothing, even if ill-fitting, transforms the mood. A cap set at the right angle can produce instant military confidence. A polished button has magical properties. Men who looked like farmhands yesterday suddenly attempt the bearing of emperors. The effect may last until the first muddy march, but for one glowing hour it is excellent. Still, uncertainty sits behind everything. News from the front keeps arriving. The war is larger than your understanding of it. Armies move across states you have never seen. Commanders gain reputations and lose them. Rumours spread through camp faster than measles, and with nearly the same reliability. One day you hear that victory is near. The next day you hear of losses that hollow out a regiment. Scholars continue to dispute what most common soldiers believed about the war's duration in 1862 because belief changed quickly once enthusiasm met reality. As you drift towards sleep, one truth becomes clear. Becoming a soldier is not a single grand transformation. It is a series of small surrenders. You surrender privacy, routine, certainty, and the illusion that your life belongs entirely to you. In return, you receive comradeship, danger, discipline, and a new name in the eyes of the world. Soldier. The word sounds solid. Your feelings are not. Pride is there. Fear is there too. So is embarrassment, excitement, and the faint suspicion that everyone around you is pretending to understand more than they actually do. That suspicion is correct. Nearly all of you are improvising your courage. Above the camp, the night settles softly. Firelight flickers against canvas. The last murmurs sink into the dark. The air cools on your face, carrying smoke and damp soil. Somewhere a horse stamps. Somewhere a man whispers home into the sleeve of his coat as if the word itself can travel. You close your eyes in a world that has already begun changing you, even before you have learned the first proper motion of a soldier's step. Morning comes early in camp, and not because you feel refreshed. You wake because somebody is already moving, coughing, stomping, or shouting, and the whole thin fabric world around you seems determined to prove that sleep was only a rumour. Dawn in 1862 has a chill that slips through blankets and settles in your joints. Canvas walls breathe cold air. Damp ground presses its hardness upward. Wood smoke hangs low, mixing with the smell of wool, ash, and men who have not enjoyed a proper wash in longer than they would politely admit. This is where the real shaping begins. Not on a battlefield, not under cannon fire, on an ordinary patch of ground where officers try to turn a crowd of civilians into something that can move together without collapsing into a county picnic. It is less dramatic than you expected, also more exhausting. The bugle calls or the drums begin, and their sound has a way of entering your bones. A note cuts through the morning haze, sharp and insistent, followed by movement in every direction. Men drag themselves upright, fumble with belts, pull on coats, and grope for hats that somehow migrated during the night. Some react quickly, eager to look efficient. Others squint at the new day as if personally betrayed by it. You soon learn one of army life's first commandments. Nothing happens only once. If an officer tells you to stand in line, you will stand in line again. If he tells you to turn right, you will turn right until the command becomes more familiar than your own thoughts. Repetition rule everything. The army does not trust memory until memory becomes muscle. At first the drill seems absurdly simple. Surely grown men know how to stand, walk, and turn. That comforting theory lasts about 3 minutes. Put 50 or 80 recruits in a row and ask them to wheel as one body, and human awkwardness reveals itself in all its glory. Boots scrape at wrong angles, elbows collide, muskets tilt where they should not. Somebody always turns the wrong way. Somebody else stares at the officer with the dazed look of a cow considering philosophy. The manuals exist, of course. Officers rely on drill books that reduce the business of soldiering to precise commands and exact motions. In both Union and Confederate camps, much instruction draws from established military systems that had roots in earlier European practice. The idea is elegant on paper. In real life, you're trying to execute it while hungry, sleepy, and distracted by a fly marching across your cheek. Still, the logic reveals itself. A line of soldiers must move together because battle will be smoke, noise, and confusion. Your body needs habits strong enough to function when your nerves start unraveling. So you practice how to shoulder arms, present arms, load in sequence, align by company, dress the line, and maintain intervals. Each motion has a place. Every place has a command. Every command must be obeyed at once. It sounds rigid. It is rigid. Yet there is a rough comfort in that rigidity. A human being under strain likes instructions. Left face is wonderfully clear. Much clearer than the larger question of what exactly this war is going to do to you. Drill happens in open fields trampled flat by repeated use. The ground may be dry and dusty, puffing around your boots with every step, or slick with recent rain, turning the whole exercise into a mud-coloured comedy. Sun beats down on caps and shoulders by late morning. Sweat gathers under your collar and between your shoulder blades. Your shirt sticks. Your mouth grows dry. The leather of your gear rubs one spot raw, then keeps rubbing because the army's not especially interested in your preferences. You begin to understand posture in a new way. Civilian standing is casual. Soldier standing is work. You keep your back straight, head up, feet placed properly, weapon held at the correct angle. Try doing that for long stretches while an officer corrects every inch of your existence. Muscles you never noticed before now send formal complaints. Some officers teach well. They demonstrate correct and keep their tempers within civilized limits. Others seem animated by personal resentment toward the concept of human imperfection. Their voices can lash across the field with astonishing force. A man who was a lawyer, merchant, or local politician a month ago may suddenly discover he enjoys bellowing commands like a Roman statue come to life. Rank has a way of encouraging theatre. You see the same variety among non-commissioned officers, especially sergeants. These men often matter more to your daily life than grander figures. A capable sergeant can save a company from constant confusion. He knows how to dress a line, enforce order, and spot the recruit who's about to do something deeply foolish. A bad sergeant can make every hour feel twice as long. Historians still debate how much army effectiveness depended less on famous generals and more on this middle layer of practical authority. There is plenty of practical authority needed, because recruits bring all their old habits with them. Farmers may be strong but unused to moving in strict formation. Clerks may understand paperwork but not blister care. City men may laugh at country awkwardness until country endurance leaves them behind on a march. Some have handled firearms, many have not, or not in the manner the army requires. A hunting rifle and a military musket are cousins, not twins. When weapons drill begins in earnest, the atmosphere sharpens. A musket is heavy enough to make your wrists complain, especially when you are ordered to hold it steadily during repeated exercises. The metal grows hot in the sun and cold at dawn. Its smell is a mix of oil, iron, wood, and old smoke. You learn the loading procedure in steps, each one meant to be followed with exactness. Tier cartridge, charge cartridge, draw rammer, ram cartridge, return rammer, prime, ready. The sequence has to become automatic. Fumbling matters. Instructors remind you of that. They remind you loudly. Sometimes the shouting is useful. Sometimes it merely proves that volume and wisdom have never been close relatives. You also spend time on simpler tasks that do not make heroic paintings. Cleaning equipment, folding blankets, stowing gear, maintaining camp order, learning where refuse goes and where latrines should be dug. The army is obsessed with arrangement, and for good reason. A disorderly camp breeds confusion and sickness. Disease will kill far more men than romance ever admits. Officers may not fully understand germ theory in the modern sense, but many know filth is trouble. Sanitation lessons are not exciting. They are, however, unforgettable once a camp has ignored them for too long. The smell alone teaches the point. Sour waste, stagnant water, unwashed clothes, spoiled food, and too many bodies pressed together create an atmosphere that feels almost chewable. You discover quickly that a breeze is one of God's finer gifts to soldiers. Food enters the rhythm of training like a practical joke. Breakfast may be salt pork, hard bread, coffee, or some variation of those companions. The coffee is often strong enough to wake the dead, though sadly not enough to improve the bread. Hardtack deserves its famous reputation. It is durable, plain, and capable of making a man's jaw feel enlisted too. Soldiers joke about it constantly. One quirky tidbit from camp life is that men sometimes tapped hardtack on a surface first to evict weevils, as if politely asking prior tenants to vacate. Meals vanish quickly because hunger has become a permanent roommate. Drill works up an appetite with mechanical efficiency, yet eating is rarely restful. There is always another formation, another inspection, another instruction to scramble toward. Leisure exists in fragments, a mouthful of coffee by a fire, a joke traded while adjusting straps, a brief moment sitting on an overturned crate, letting your feet forget themselves. Inspections add another layer of strain. An officer passes through camp, studying uniforms, weapons, tents, and the general appearance of men. Suddenly everyone cares deeply about small details. Buttons get polished, blankets are straightened, belts are adjusted, faces adopt expressions of innocent competence that convince no one. Dust remains dust, no matter how sternly you glare at it. Personal pride can grow in this strange soil. The company that drills best wins admiration. The man who learns, commands quickly, earns respect. Even the most sarcastic recruit feels a quiet satisfaction when a movement that once seemed impossible begins to click. There you are, turning with the line instead of against it, stepping in rhythm instead of tripping over your own thoughts. Progress is not glamorous, it is steady. Sometimes that is better. Yet training in 1862 often has serious limits. Many regiments receive only a short period of instruction before being pushed toward active service. Political urgency, manpower needs, and poor organisation can shrink preparation to a fraction of what officers might prefer. This creates an odd reality. You can spend hours perfecting parade ground motions and still remain unready for what real combat will demand. Scholars continue to disagree over how much drill truly prepared volunteers for battle versus simply giving them a framework for obedience under stress. The men themselves notice these contradictions. Around the fire at night, opinions flourish. One recruit says drill is everything, another says shooting matters more. A third claims the army mostly teaches you how to stand around with dignity while waiting for bad coffee. He's not entirely wrong. Waiting is an advanced military art. In those off moments, personalities deepen. Someone sings softly while mending a tear. Someone writes clumsy letters home, tongue pressed in concentration. Someone reads newspapers aloud with dramatic emphasis, then argues politics as if the camp were a debating hall. Religion is present too. Men pray alone or in groups, reading scripture by fading light, seeking order from a world that feels newly unstable. Camp revivals sometimes sweep through regiments with powerful effect, especially when sickness or casualties darken morale. Sleep remains imperfect. Your body is more tired now, but also more sore. Shoulders ache from carrying arms, calves throb, hands stiffen. A blister on your heel feels outrageously large for something so small. You become intimate with discomfort. Not dramatic suffering. Persistent discomfort. The kind that teaches patience whether you want the lesson or not. You also learn shame, not the grand moral variety, the practical kind. Maybe you miss a command. Maybe you drop something at the worst moment. Maybe you march out of step under the gaze of the whole company. Laughter follows. Good-natured sometimes. Cruel sometimes. Armies can be generous communities, but they are not gentle schools. You toughen partly because embarrassment loses its sting after repeated exposure, and then there is homesickness, which behaves unpredictably. It may strike at evening, at dawn, or in the middle of drill because a smell or phrase suddenly opens the door to memory. Bacon grease can remind you of a kitchen. Wet wool can remind you of winter chores. The sound of a fiddle drifting from another tent can make your chest feel hollow. You keep moving anyway. That becomes the answer to most things. You keep moving. Gradually, the line between self and company begins to blur. Not disappear, but soften. You eat together, train together, grumble together, and learn each other's strengths through repetition. The larger, cheerful fool who could not keep step turns out to be the fastest at setting camp. The quiet man with perfect posture faints in the heat. The joker becomes reliable under pressure. The braggart discovers silence after his first serious dressing down. Training strips away some illusions and replaces them with clearer shapes. Even your hearing changes. You grow used to the cadence of commands, the clack of weapons, the rustle of wool, the slap of wet shoes, the drumbeat that sets bodies in motion. Camp has a language beyond words. You recognize when an officer is annoyed by the rhythm of his boots. You know the difference between laughter that lifts spirits and laughter that hides worry. You can tell from the way a line forms whether the company is tired, proud, distracted, or ready to quarrel. By now, your civilian habits have not vanished, but they have started sharing space with military ones. You rise faster, you pack quicker, you notice alignment, timing, and rules. You complain more skillfully. This is a real development. Amateur grumbling becomes professional grumbling with astonishing speed in camp life, and somewhere inside all the monotony, something firm takes shape. Not heroism exactly, more like endurance with structure. The army is teaching your body to obey, your patience to stretch, and your mind to function inside repetition. It is building a soldier out of drills, discomfort, routine, and collective pressure. The field empties as dusk settles. The day's dust clings to your boots and cuffs. Smoke rises from cook fires in soft blue threads. The evening air cools the sweat on your neck. Nearby voices lower into tired conversation. Metal clicks softly as weapons are stacked or cleaned. You sit for a moment with aching limbs and a strange, hard-earned satisfaction. The work has been dull, exacting, and relentless. It has also changed the way you stand in the world. Not elegantly, not completely, but undeniably. By the time the army starts handing you proper gear, you already understand one useful truth. Nothing issued by government was designed with your comfort as its highest ambition. The clothing pile in front of you does not look like romance. It looks like work, wool, leather, canvas, brass, and stiff cloth lie in heaps or stacks, waiting to be turned into the shape of a soldier. The transformation is impressive from a distance. Up close, it scratches. The first thing you notice is weight. Even before you march a mile, the army begins hanging itself on your body, shirt, trousers, jacket, cap, shoes, belt, cartridge box, canteen, haversack, blanket, perhaps a knapsack, maybe a gum blanket or shelter, half depending on supply and side. Then comes the musket and all the small things that hide inside larger things. A comb, a cup, a sewing kit, letters, bits of food, tobacco, perhaps a Bible, perhaps a deck of cards, perhaps some small charm from home that logic dismisses and feeling keeps. Uniform issue in 1862 is not perfectly neat. In the Union Army, standardization improves over time, but the real world still intrudes. Sizes vary, quality varies, delivery varies. A jacket may fit your chest and betray your arms. Trousers may be loose at the waist and mean at the knees. Shoes may be almost right, which is a dangerous category all its own. In the Confederate Army, supply can be even more uneven, especially as shortages grow sharper. Men may wear homespun, captured items, state-issued garments, or a patchwork that defies painterly expectations. Historians still argue about how often common images of ragged Confederates oversimplify the wide range of appearance in different armies and moments. On the Union side, blue dominates or tries to. Dark blue frock coats or shorter sack coats, sky blue trousers, forage caps with soft crowns and short brims. On the Confederate side, grey appears in the public imagination, but reality includes butternut shades, brown, tan, mixed cloth, and garments that have faded into uncertainty. Sun, rain, soap, and hard use are all excellent artists. They repaint uniforms without asking permission. Whatever colour you wear, wool becomes your daily companion. It has virtues. Wool keeps warmth even when damp. It holds up reasonably well. It also itches, traps heat, and carries smells with a loyalty you may not admire. In cool weather, the jacket can feel like protection. In heat, it becomes a personal grudge. You sweat beneath it until your shirt clings and the cloth grows salty along the seams. Then the wind picks up, and suddenly that same dampness chills your skin like a cold hand at the neck. The texture of army clothing never quite lets you forget it is there. Seams rub against the shoulder, collar edges scrape your throat, trousers bind at odd moments when climbing, kneeling, or sitting on a rough ground. Everything stiffens after rain and drying. Everything softens slightly with wear, though not enough to become truly friendly. The army does not cuddle. Your shoes deserve their own chapter of complaint. They are often called brogans, rough leather shoes made for utility rather than elegance. They can be strong. But strength is not the same thing as kindness. At first they feel stubborn and hard, resisting your feet as if offended by toes. The leather creaks, the soles slap dust or mud. If they fit poorly, blisters bloom fast, and a blister on campaign can rise in importance until it feels like the central issue of the war. You may stuff paper or rags into the wrong space, hoping to improve the fit. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it merely creates new suffering in a different location. This, too, is a military lesson. Socks matter more than speeches. You learn that quickly. Dry socks are luxury, medicine, and morale all bundled together. Wet socks are a personal insult from the universe. Men treasure spare pairs when they can get them. Women at home often send hand-knit socks in care packages, and soldiers mention them in letters with a tenderness usually reserved for family. A fresh pair against sore feet can make a grim day briefly civilized. The headgear seems simple, but even a cap affects how you feel. A Union forage cap can tilt with jaunty confidence when you're young and feeling theatrical. Slouch hats, more common in some units and regions, offer better shade and a looser kind of identity. Confederate soldiers especially may favour broad-brimmed hats when supply allows, though all sorts of head coverings appear in the field. Hats collect sweat, dust, rain, and status. Men decorate them with badges, pins, feathers, or bits of flair when regulations and officers permit. Vanity survives every campaign, perhaps especially there. Then there is the leather. Belts cross your waist, straps cut over shoulder and chest, cartridge boxes hang at the hip or behind it, cap pouches, bayonet scabbards, and various small fastenings complete the arrangement. The smell of leather mixes with oil and human sweat until it becomes one of the defining odours of soldiering. In the morning, when dew has settled, the straps feel cool and slightly damp. By noon they are warm and tacky against your shirt. They leave grooves in cloth and red marks on skin. After long wear, your body begins to memorise them. Your cartridge box is not glamorous, but it is central. Inside are the paper cartridges that feed your musket, each a little promise of violence wrapped in order. The box must be kept dry as best you can. Rain threatens it. Rivers threaten it. Clumsy handling threatens it. Men fuss over cartridge boxes because a soldier's confidence rests partly in the small certainty that his ammunition is where it should be. Nothing calms the nerves like checking the same item 3 times in 10 minutes. This is known in some circles as practical diligence and in others as worrying with accessories. The haversack carries food and miscellaneous necessities, and it develops a personality quickly. Made of cloth, often tarred or painted for weather resistance, it bumps against your side when walking. Inside may be hardtack, salt meat, coffee, sugar, perhaps a bit of cheese or whatever else fortune and supply provide. Crumbs settle into its corners, grease soaks into the fabric. Strange smells take up permanent residence. A haversack can become a portable archive of meals past. Open one after several warm days and it may answer the question nobody asked. Your canteen is another essential companion. Water is life, but the canteen rarely improves the flavour. Made variously of tin, wood, or covered metal depending on type and availability. It hangs on a strap and knocks softly against your body as you move. The water inside often turns lukewarm, metallic, or faintly sour by the time you drink it. You drink anyway. Thirst is an honest persuader. Some men mix coffee, whiskey when available, or other substances with water. Some fill canteens from sources they should distrust. Clean water is precious and not always recognisable on sight. Armies pay for that ignorance in sickness. Now to the knapsack, that square-shouldered monument to regret. In theory, it allows you to carry extra clothing, small personal items, and useful gear. In practice, it sits against your back like a determined brick with straps. Packed well, it is manageable. Packed badly, it becomes an instrument of reflection, encouraging you to ponder every object you chose to bring and every object you wish to throw into a ditch. Soldiers constantly adjust their loads. A blanket moves from inside to outside. A cup dangles from a strap. A spare shirt vanishes into another corner. The arrangement is never final because your back keeps revising the terms. Many soldiers soon become ruthless editors of their possessions. Every extra ounce must justify itself. That book from home may comfort you, but does it comfort you enough to carry for 10 miles in July heat? Those extra underthings sound sensible, but sense weakens under weight. A frying pan may seem useful until it bangs against everything you own like a brass opinion. Men discard items on the march, retrieve items later, swap items, steal items, and complain about items with tremendous energy. One quirky detail from soldier life is how often camp roads became lined with abandoned gear during hard movement, as if the army were shedding scales. Blankets are heavy but precious, rolled and slung over the shoulder or strapped with other gear. They smell of wool, smoke, rain, and the sleeper who used them. A good blanket means warmth at night, some padding on rough ground, and a little barrier against damp earth. A bad blanket means misery distributed evenly from neck to ankle. Some men also carry a rubberized ground cloth or gum blanket when available. This marvellous bit of practicality can serve as rain cover, bed layer, or impromptu shelter. It is not elegant, but in foul weather it can feel like advanced civilization. Your musket is the most important object you carry and the least optional. For many infantrymen in 1862, that means a rifled musket of considerable length and solid weight. It is wood and iron, balance and burden, discipline and danger, held at rest. It already asks something of your arms, carried all day. It teaches familiarity through ache. The barrel catches light. The lock plate cools at dawn. The stock grows smooth where hands repeatedly grip it. Powder smoke and oil work their smell into the grain until the weapon has its own presence, almost like an ill-tempered companion that demands constant cleaning. Cleaning matters because black powder fouling builds quickly after firing. Residue cakes the barrel and mechanism with a dirty persistence. You wipe, oil, inspect, and repeat. A neglected weapon invites failure, and failure in combat is a word nobody wants to contemplate for long. So soldiers clean weapons while talking, joking or brooding by firelight, metal glinting in the dusk. The soft rasp of cloth on steel becomes part of camp music. Bayonets add another layer of menace and awkwardness. Socket bayonets fix to the muzzle and turn the musket into a spear of startling length. They are more often carried than used in the intimate fashion people imagine. But their presence matters. They change posture, drill, and imagination. To wear a bayonet at your side in its scabbard is to feel the army's blunt logic resting against your hip. It taps there while you walk, a metallic reminder that your clothing is not costume. Of course, what you wear and carry also signals identity. A regiment takes pride in appearance when it can. Some units boast distinctive dress inherited from militia traditions, especially early in the war, though practicality and regulation tend to flatten eccentricities over time. Zouave-inspired uniforms, with baggy trousers and decorative trim, attract admiration and comment. They also attract dirt with democratic enthusiasm. Looking splendid on parade and living in the field are related but separate arts. Weather changes everything. In summer, the uniform becomes a stove. Sweat trickles down your spine. Cloth darkens under the arms and around the chest. Dust glues itself to damp skin and exposed neck. In rain, the whole load seems to double. Wool drinks water greedily. Leather swells. Shoes squish. Blankets soak up cold and resentment. In winter, if you are fortunate enough to have adequate layers, every garment becomes treasure. Gloves, scarves, extra shirts, earmuffs improvised from cloth. All can matter intensely. If supply is poor, cold slips into hands and feet with a patient cruelty. Repair becomes part of your skill set. Buttons pop, seams split, soles wear thin, straps crack. Soldiers mend their own clothing when they can, using needle and thread from small housewives, those compact sewing kits often sent from home. A man who never sewed in civilian life may sit cross-legged by a fire, tongue caught in concentration, trying to reattach a button before inspection. Pride has to make peace with necessity. The shirt does not care about your old assumptions. The smell of an equipped soldier is a study in layers. Fresh issue has hints of dye, leather, oil, and storage. After use comes sweat, smoke, mud, metal, old coffee, damp wool, campfire ash, and whatever the haversack is quietly fermenting. The combined effect is not fashionable. It is unmistakable. You could probably identify a regiment in the dark just by the atmosphere it carries. And then there is the simple fact that you cannot ever entirely put it all down. Even at rest, your belongings need arranging, protecting, drying, cleaning, or watching. A soldier's possessions are few compared with a civilian home, yet they demand constant thought. What is wet? What is missing? What needs mending? What can be traded? What must be guarded from thieves, rain, or careless feet? Material life becomes compact and intense. By evening, when you finally ease straps from your shoulders and set your musket within reach, relief spreads through you almost like warmth. The red pressure lines on your body sting the open air. Your shirt lifts from damp skin. Boots come off with a sigh that might be yours. Nearby, other men do the same, rubbing sore feet, checking for damage, rearranging loads for tomorrow. The camp smells of smoke, leather, and tired wool. Firelight catches on brass and iron in brief, soft glimmers. You look at the pile of things that now counts as your world, and you realize how completely the army has remade the relationship between your body and every object it touches. Nothing is decorative anymore. Everything must earn its place against your skin. Camp life settles over you not as a single routine, but as 100 little repetitions that slowly take possession of the day. The army may move on maps, and generals may imagine grand lines and bold advances. But for you, the war often takes the shape of smoke curling from a cook fire, damp socks hanging from a rope, and the quiet misery of trying to brush dirt from a blanket that has already accepted dirt as its natural condition. The camp becomes your village, workplace, dining room, and sometimes your prison, all arranged on open ground with a confidence that weather does not share. You wake to camp sounds before the sun has fully committed itself. Someone stirs coals, someone coughs with serious conviction. Tin cups clink. Horses stamp and snort from a nearby line. A mule complains in a tone that suggests it has examined humanity and found it lacking. Voices travel oddly in the early air, soft but clear, drifting through canvas and smoke. The ground under you feels cold and grudging. Dew has settled on ropes, tent flaps, and boot leather. When you step outside, the air carries wet earth, old ashes, and the faint greasy promise of breakfast. The tents vary according to army, season, and fortune. Some men sleep in wedge tents with sloping sides that seem designed by someone who dislikes sitting upright. Others crowd into larger wall tents if rank or function permits. In rougher conditions, shelter may be improvised from canvas, blankets, branches, or whatever can resist rain for at least part of a night. Nothing in camp is truly private. A tent wall separates bodies, not lives. You hear men breathe, mutter, pray, scratch, snore, and dream. You become intimately familiar with strangers in ways polite society never rehearsed. Space is always negotiated. Where do boots go? Where does the wet coat hang? Who sleeps nearest the entrance? Who takes up too much room? Who kicks in the night? These are not philosophical matters when 6 or 8 men share a small shelter. They are domestic realities with military consequences. An untidy tent breeds irritation, and irritation in a confined space grows with remarkable speed. The camp street, that narrow corridor between rows of tents, becomes one of the most lived-in places in your world. Men pass carrying water, firewood, kettles, muskets, and scraps of information. Mud forms quickly if the ground is soft. Dust forms faster if it is dry. Chickens occasionally appear by mysterious means. So do dogs. A camp dog can become beloved in a week, trotting with exaggerated seriousness through a company street as if it has accepted some unspoken commission. Soldiers are entirely capable of giving an animal a rank, a personality, and a reputation more flattering than many officers receive. Breakfast is rarely delicate. Coffee leads the parade, thick, dark, and almost medicinal in its seriousness. The smell of it is one of the great comforts of soldier life, rising with steam into the morning chill. Bacon or salt pork spits in a pan if there is a pan. Hard bread appears with its usual confidence. Sometimes beans, sometimes something less identifiable. You eat fast, often standing or crouched, balancing cup and ration with the practiced awkwardness camp requires. Grease gets on fingers, on sleeves, on everything. A hungry man becomes forgiving. Not elegant, just forgiving. Fire is the centre of so much. A small blaze gives warmth, light, cooked food, and conversation. Men cluster around it instinctively, palms out to the heat, faces orange in the glow, smoke gets into eyes, hair, cloth, blankets, and every private possession you own. After enough weeks, smoke becomes part of your very definition. If a soldier in 1862 ever returned home completely unscented, his family would probably assume he had been replaced by an actor. Cooking, when supplies allow variation, becomes a source of pride and tension. Some men are excellent improvisers, turning poor ingredients into meals that feel nearly human. Others should not be trusted with a spoon, a flame, or a basic concept of timing. A company may appoint cooks, But everybody has opinions about cooking, and those opinions are rarely modest. A badly burned ration can produce more loud commentary than a speech by a governor. Strange little recipes appear everywhere. Hardtack fried in grease, coffee strong enough to strip paint, bits of meat chopped into stews of uncertain ambition. Hunger improves almost all reviews. Water parties head out with barrels or containers, and they are more important than their title sounds. Water is constant labour. It must be found, carried, guarded, shared, sometimes boiled, sometimes merely hoped over. The source may be a creek, river, spring, or well. And every source comes with questions. Is it clean? Is it upstream from horses? Is it downstream from 1,000 other bad decisions? Armies learn the character of a landscape by its water. A clear stream in the morning light may look heavenly and still hold trouble in its innocent sparkle. Then there are the smells, honest and unavoidable. Good camp smells exist. Coffee, wood smoke, fresh bread when a baker has somehow worked a minor miracle, pine boughs cut for bedding, cold morning air before the day warms. But bad smells are more democratic. Wet wool, old grease, unwashed bodies, mud mixed with mule droppings, latrines in warm weather, stagnant puddles, rotten scraps near the edge of camp. Camp life trains the nose to sort degrees of unpleasantness with scientific care. Sanitation becomes one of those subjects nobody dreams about before enlistment and nobody forgets after. Officers who care about health insist on proper camp policing, which means keeping the company area orderly, refuse removed, and waste disposed of at a safe distance. Men do not always cooperate cheerfully. Digging, carrying, and cleaning have never been the glamorous side of war. Yet disease can move through camp faster than rumour, and camp always has rumour in abundance. Dysentery, typhoid, measles, pneumonia, and all manner of fevers haunt these crowded communities. Medical knowledge is improving in some practical ways, but no one has perfected the art of keeping thousands of men healthy while they live in mud, eat indifferent food, and borrow each other's germs without permission. Much of camp life is waiting. Waiting for orders, waiting for pay, waiting for mail, waiting for rations, waiting for weather to improve or stop improving quite so much. Waiting does not sound dramatic enough for history books, but it fills enormous stretches of a soldier's existence. Some men endure it well. Others start pacing like caged animals. Cards appear, dice appear. Games of skill and luck blossom on blankets, boxes, and upturned barrels. Small coins change hands. So do boasts. No matter the century, a bored group of men will invent competition from nearly nothing. Music drifts through camp more often than you might expect. Someone has a fiddle, someone else a harmonica, fife, or banjo. A man with a good singing voice becomes valuable after dark. Songs can be comic, sentimental, patriotic, mournful, or indecent in ways not suitable for polite company. Even a rough chorus softens camp for a while. Sound travels over tents and wagon lines, mixing with crickets, distant hoofbeats, and the crackle of fires. In those moments the army feels strangely domestic, like a travelling town built out of canvas and fatigue. Letters occupy a sacred place in camp culture. Mail call can electrify the whole company. Men who act indifferent suddenly become alert. Names are called. Hands shoot up. Faces brighten or fall in an instant. A letter from home is not just information. It is touch translated into paper. You hold the sheet carefully, seeing familiar handwriting, perhaps catching the faint smell of a house, a drawer, a kitchen, or perfume if luck is smiling. Ink on paper has extraordinary power when the rest of your world is noise and dirt. Not everyone receives letters regularly. That absence can sting. Some men read theirs loud. Others keep them private, folding and unfolding them until the paper grows soft at the creases. Illiterate soldiers may ask comrades to read for them or to write replies. This creates curious little scenes of intimacy, with one man speaking his affection, worries, or practical requests, while another gives those feelings grammar. A camp can be full of rough voices and still hold tenderness in plain sight. Religion threads quietly through daily life. Some men carry pocket testaments and read them by daylight or candle stub. Chaplains hold services when circumstances allow. Prayer meetings spring up. A hymn sung in camp sounds different from one in church. The open air changes it. So does the knowledge that some of the men singing are frightened, ill, homesick, or simply trying to make sense of a life that now runs on commands and uncertainty. Other men avoid formal devotion but keep superstitions of their own. A lucky coin, a particular routine before sleep, a habit of touching a charm from home. Historians still debate whether soldiers were becoming more overtly religious during the war or simply more open about needs they might once have hidden. You also discover the social hierarchy of idleness. There are men who can turn free time into useful labour, mending clothes, cleaning weapons, carving small objects, or helping cook. There are men who can transform the same hour into an advanced seminar on complaining. There are amateur philosophers, tireless gossip collectors, storytellers, boasters, practical jokers, and those rare, beautiful souls who can produce laughter without malice. A camp is a laboratory of character. It gives everyone too many chances to reveal themselves. Pranks thrive in this environment. A hat disappears and returns on a tent pole. A snorer wakes to find his boots relocated to an improbable place. A recruit too attached to neatness discovers that camp life considers neatness a challenge rather than a norm. The humour is not always gentle, but it often serves a purpose. Laughter breaks tension, especially when tension has nowhere obvious to go. Soldiers can be astonishingly childish and astonishingly mature, often within the same half hour. Weather is a tyrant over everything. A hot day turns the tent into a wool-lined oven, trapping stale air and body heat until stepping outside feels like salvation. Flies appear with military enthusiasm, landing on food, faces, and any patch of exposed skin. Rain changes camp into a wet puzzle. Guy ropes sag. Trenches fill. Blankets mildew. Smoke from damp wood clings low and mean. Boots sink. Sleeves stay wet at the cuffs. Hands wrinkle from constant moisture. Yet a clear evening after rain can feel almost luxurious, with cool air washing the camp clean and stars appearing above the dark tents like a second, quieter encampment. Food remains the subject of endless discussion because it governs mood with brutal efficiency. Rations can be sufficient on paper and miserable in reality. Salt pork may be too fatty or too lean. Bread may be stale before it reaches you. Fresh vegetables, when they appear, receive gratitude usually reserved for saints. Soldiers become experts in scavenging additions. Berries, onions, eggs, milk, and whatever can be bought, traded, or acquired through personal enterprise brighten a meal beyond reason. The word enterprise in camp often contains a great deal of moral flexibility. Sutlers, those civilian merchants licensed to follow the army, add another layer to camp life. Their tents or wagons offer tobacco, writing paper, sweets, canned goods, soap, and little comforts at prices soldiers frequently consider criminal. The relationship is affectionate only when the inventory is good and the coin is in your pocket. Otherwise, the sutler stands as living proof that capitalism can march beside patriotism without blushing. Personal cleanliness becomes a campaign within the campaign. Washing may happen in streams, basins, or from a canteen poured over head and shoulders with more hope than abundance. Soap is precious. A proper wash feels glorious, even if it lasts only minutes before dust or sweat returns. Shaving, when managed, can restore a man's sense that he belongs to civilization. Haircuts may be done by comrades with uneven skill. The results vary from respectable to deeply memorable. These are an unwelcome fact in many camps, and men battle them with firelight inspections, boiling when possible and dark humour when not. Clothing seams can harbour little armies of their own, and soldiers refer to the pests with the kind of resigned familiarity humans develop toward recurring enemies. Very few aspects of war are noble under close examination, and this is certainly one of them. As evening deepens, camps soften. Fires burn lower. Tin cups settle beside bedrolls. Talk drops into murmurs. Somewhere nearby, a low conversation continues under the canvas. Somewhere farther off, laughter erupts once, then fades. The night air touches your face with a cool gentleness the day rarely offers. Smoke hangs above the company street, the earth underfoot, churned and imperfect. still feels like the only ground that belongs to you for now. You sit among blankets, belts, cups, and quiet breathing, wrapped in the odd truth that a camp can be filthy, crowded, hungry, noisy, and still become familiar enough to feel like home in all the ways that matter for one more night. Sooner or later, the camp stops feeling fixed, and the road takes over your life. Orders come down, tents are struck, fires are stamped out, kettles vanish into wagons or haversacks. The little city of canvas that seemed almost permanent yesterday begins dissolving before sunrise, and you understand how temporary everything in army life really is. A camp is never home for long. It is only a pause between stretches of movement, and movement in 1862 can wear a man down more thoroughly than any speech can prepare him for. You wake in darkness or grey half-light, fumbling at straps with cold fingers. The ground is damp. The air smells of wet canvas, ash, and restless animals. Men move around you in low mutters, packing blankets, rolling shelter pieces, tying knots badly and then retying them under pressure. Somewhere an officer is already too loud for the hour. Somewhere else a teamster is arguing with a mule in tones of personal betrayal. The whole camp seems to exhale and then pull itself upright. Marching sounds simple when spoken aloud. You walk from one place to another, that is all. In practice, marching is a complete occupation of body and mind. You do not merely walk. You carry half your world on your shoulders while trying to keep place in a column that stretches and stalls like a living creature with too many joints. The road dictates everything. Its width, its mud, its dust, its stones, its slopes, its bridges, and its ruts all become intensely important. A civilian can ignore a road's personality, a soldier cannot. At first, the movement may even feel exciting. Lines form. Officers ride or stride about. Drums beat the step. Sunlight catches bayonets and brass in bright flashes. Local people gather to watch, especially near towns or farm lanes. Children stare as if the army were a travelling theatre. Women wave. Old men stand back with folded arms, measuring the procession in silence. For a little while, the column looks like war as the newspapers describe it. Ordered, stern, purposeful. Then the miles begin. A few miles teach you one truth, 10 miles teach you another. By the time the day stretches further still, your whole body has entered a new conversation with pain. Straps bite more deeply than they did in camp. The musket shifts from manageable burden to a familiar nuisance. Your blanket roll seems to gain weight through dark magic. The leather on your shoulders warms and rubs. The back of your neck grows sticky with sweat. Dust settles on your face and lips until you can taste the road with every breath. If the weather is dry, the march becomes a moving cloud. Hundreds or thousands of boots grind dirt into powder. Wagons add wheels to the work. Horses and mules stir it higher. By midday, the dust hangs in the air, thick enough to soften distant shapes and coat everything it touches. It gets into ears, collars, food, eyebrows, cartridge boxes, and the corners of your mouth. Sweat turns it to paste on your skin. Men cough it out and swallow it right back in. Water helps, but water vanishes quickly on a hot road. If the weather is wet, the road chooses cruelty of another kind. Mud clings to soles and thickens with every step, turning boots into weights. Wagons sink to their axles, horses strain, men slip. The column halts, lurches, and halts again. A road that seemed passable on a map becomes a brown trench of frustration. Rain drips from hat brims and runs down your spine. Wool grows heavy, blankets soak up the sky. Every fence rail and tree seems to watch you struggle in dignified silence. You discover that marching is full of starts and stops. The column moves, then freezes, moves, then freezes again. A wagon is stuck ahead, a bridge is narrow, another regiment has crossed your path. Orders have changed. Nobody entirely knows why. Standing still can be almost worse than walking, because the body cools awkwardly, the load stays on, and your feet begin to object with renewed eloquence. Then suddenly the line jerks forward, and everyone scrambles to regain spacing. Patience becomes less a virtue than a survival skill. Your feet become the centre of existence. A hot spot on the heel can worry you more than enemy cavalry 50 miles away. Each step presses cloth, leather, skin, and bone into prolonged negotiation. Socks dampen, toes rub, gravel sneaks in. A blister swells invisibly, then announces itself like a trumpet. Men who laughed over coffee an hour earlier now limp in concentrated silence, saving all their energy for the business of placing one foot ahead of the other. When the army halts briefly, men drop where they stand, if allowed, not gracefully. They fold onto stumps, ditch banks, fence lines, or the bare roadside with the solemn relief of bodies reaching truce. Canteens pass from hand to hand. Someone loosens a collar, someone adjusts a strap that has soared at one spot too long. Someone stares into the distance with the blank expression of a man who has temporarily become all legs. Then the order comes again, and a groan rises through the ranks. Not mutiny, just honest opinion. Heat has its own command over the march. In summer sun, the road seems to shine back at you. The air above it shimmers. Flies gather wherever animals pause. Sweat runs into your eyes and leaves salt at the corners. Shirts darken across the chest and back. Lips crack. Men talk less because talking requires moisture and optimism. A tree line promising shade becomes the most beautiful sight in the world. Even 5 minutes beneath branches can feel like a royal privilege. Cold weather is not easier. It simply attacks from different angles. Fingers stiffen around the musket. Wind cuts through cloth where movement fails to warm you. Breath clouds before your face. Mud can freeze into hard ridges that jar the feet at every step. Snow, if it comes, muffles sound but magnifies distance. The column turns pale and ghostly in winter light. Men wrapped in whatever extra cloth they possess. Each exhalation briefly visible and then gone. The pace is not always the same. Sometimes you march at a steady cadence, guided by drums or the rhythm of the unit. Sometimes urgency pushes the speed higher than comfort can sustain. Forced marches become legends of misery for good reason. They strip the road down to its hardest terms. Men fall out, knees wobble, wagons trail behind. The column stretches thin. Officers urge, plead, or curse. Endurance becomes a blunt test of how much more your body can do after it has already given an answer. Falling out is dreaded, though it is common enough. A man drops to the roadside from cramp, exhaustion, illness, or mangled feet. Sometimes he rejoins later. Sometimes he rides a wagon. Sometimes he vanishes from your daily world through the simple mechanics of incapacity. Marching reveals weakness quickly, but it also reveals hidden reserves. The quiet man may endure better than the loud one. The recruit with poor posture in drill may prove tireless on the road. Bodies tell truths pride prefers to edit. Roadside scenes change with geography. You may pass farms with split-rail fences, wheat or corn standing in fields, orchards breathing a sweet scent in season, and curious faces peering from porches. You may move through woods where shade cools the column and bird calls flicker above the trudge of boots. You may cross streams that smell of mud, leaves, and relief. Bridges rattle under the weight of wagons and men. Town streets echo with footsteps and iron rims. Dogs bark. Church bells sound from somewhere off to the side, absurdly calm. Civilians watch and interpret you according to their loyalties, fears, and needs. Some offer water, pies, bread, or fruit when armies pass. Some close shutters. Some barter eagerly. Some lie. Some simply stare, taking in the endless file of dusty men and wondering what army life does to a face. Occupied regions complicate everything. The same road can hold courtesy and hostility within a mile of each other. A farm woman may hand out milk while her neighbour hides resentment behind a polite nod. Foraging becomes one of the march's recurring temptations. Official supply systems rarely meet every craving or need. Soldiers with sharp eyes notice chickens, apple trees, smokehouses, and gardens. The moral line between requisition, purchase, and theft can become alarmingly flexible when stomachs are empty. Armies attempt regulation, but hungry men on a hard road have their own interpretations. One quirky truth of campaigning is how often soldiers become sudden experts in locating hidden food, as if military service awakens a secret agricultural radar. The sounds of a march stay with you. Boots strike dirt or plank in collective rhythm. Canteens knock softly against hips. Harness chains jingle. Wagon wheels groan. Officers call instructions down the line. Hooves clop and splash. Somewhere ahead, someone begins a song, and bits of it drift backward through the column until it falls apart in laughter or fatigue. Silence also has its turn. There are long stretches when the only sound is movement itself. The army reduced to breathing, equipment, and stubborn forward motion. Conversation changes on the road. Early in the day, men may joke, gossip, compare rations, argue politics, or complain with real creativity. By afternoon, speech often contracts into essentials. Water left, how far, any halt soon, that hill looks cruel, my feet are done for, simplicity takes over. A hard march can reduce a man to immediate facts with admirable efficiency. Lofty ideals remain somewhere in the mind, but the body keeps asking more practical questions. You eat on the move or during short halts when possible. Hardtack is gnawed while standing. Salt meat is chewed with determination rather than pleasure. Coffee, if available at a halt, feels almost miraculous. A roadside meal has its own atmosphere. Dust settles onto food. Men squat in the shade of wagons or fence posts. The smell of sweat and horse mingles with whatever ration has been warmed. No meal tastes fully clean out on campaign. Yet hunger again proves forgiving. There is a kind of trance that marching can induce. Step, breathe, shift the musket, watch the heels ahead of you, avoid the rut, swallow dust, step again. Thought narrows. Whole stretches of road disappear from memory because your mind entered a low, steady drift just to keep the body moving. In that state, absurd details can loom large. The shape of a tree, the squeak of the one wagon wheel, the bright red neckerchief on a teamster, the smell of crushed mint by a ditch. The brain clings to small sensory anchors when the miles become repetitive. Scholars still argue about how far Civil War armies could move effectively in a day under varying conditions, because official reports, memoirs, and practical realities do not always agree. Roads, weather, terrain, supply, and morale changed everything. What looked possible on paper could unravel under heat, mud, or bad management. A march was never just a line across a map. It was thousands of individual bodies negotiating fatigue one step at a time. When evening comes and the order to halt for camp finally settles over the column, relief passes through the ranks like wind through grass. Men drop loads with visible gratitude. Shoulders lift as straps come off. Feet are examined with grim ceremony. Boots are unlaced. Socks are peeled away from skin. Blisters are discovered, cursed, and treated with whatever wisdom or nonsense the company has available. Water is fetched. Fires are built. Coffee begins again if luck and supplies permit. Smoke rises into the cooling air, and the road's tyranny loosens just enough for conversation to return. The body, though, does not forget. Calves tighten as you sit. The lower back throbs with a deep, steady ache. Shoulders feel marked by leather long after the straps are gone. Your face is crusted with dried sweat and road dust. Hands smell of iron, cloth, and stale ration grease. Yet mixed with the exhaustion is a hard satisfaction. You covered the ground. You endured the heat or mud, the waiting, the wait, the endlessness. Not gracefully, perhaps. But grace is not the road's chief requirement. Night gathers over the new camp with a tired softness. Fires glow low among darkening shapes. Voices murmur close to the ground. Somewhere nearby a man laughs once, thin with fatigue, and another answers. The smell of coffee, smoke, and damp earth drifts through the settling dark. Beyond the tents and stacked muskets, the road lies pale under the last light, already waiting to claim you again. The first time you go into battle, the morning may look almost ordinary, which feels like a personal insult. Light spreads over the fields. Mist clings low in hollows. Trees stand perfectly still. Birds continue with their own concerns. If there is a breeze, it touches your face with a softness that does not match the work ahead. You have spent so much time imagining this moment that its actual arrival seems strangely plain. No trumpet from heaven, no dramatic shiver in the earth, just men adjusting straps, checking cartridges, and trying not to think too far forward. You know battle is near because the atmosphere changes before the shooting begins. Officers speak more sharply. Mounted men appear and disappear with purpose. Wagons move to the rear. Orderlies ride past with messages. The column halts and forms. Voices drop. Jokes become thinner, quicker, less certain. Even the men who usually complain about everything grow quiet, which is more unsettling than any speech. Your body notices things before your mind arranges them. The musket feels heavier in your hand. Your mouth goes dry, though your canteen still holds water. Your stomach tightens around breakfast in a way that suggests breakfast might prefer a different location. The wool on your shoulders itches. Sweat forms, although the air is cool. You become intensely aware of your own breathing. Inhale, exhale, inhale again, as if you have only just been informed that breathing is important. Then come the first distant sounds, not always clear at first. A dull thump, another, then a sharper crackle. Artillery can sound far away and near at the same time, its echoes rolling across ground in deceptive waves. Musketry begins as scattered snaps and grows into something rougher, more continuous. You hear battle before you understand its shape. The sound travels ahead of a knowledge, turning the landscape into a question. Men listen differently when those sounds begin. Heads tilt, eyes narrow toward woods, ridges, fence lines, or smoke beginning to rise in pale smudges. Veterans, if any are near you, do not look theatrical. They look practical. That is almost worse. A recruit expects drama. Practicality makes the thing real. Someone mutters that the fight is opening on the left. Someone else says no. It is farther ahead. Rumour takes its seat instantly, as it always does when facts are late. As your unit moves closer, the sensory world thickens. The smell of powder reaches you in faint, bitter threads, mixed with trampled grass, damp soil, and the sweat of anxious men. Horses carry their own sharp smell. Wheels grind. Leather creaks. Orders pass down the line and are repeated with varying accuracy. Flags ripple above the companies, vivid and unreal against the ordinary sky. For one strange moment, the colours seem too bright for war. You may be deployed into line in a field bordered by woods, or along a road hemmed with fences, or behind a rise that conceals the enemy for a little longer. Civil War battlefields are often landscapes of farms, orchards, creeks, cornfields, and small clearings. Places built for labour suddenly become theatres for destruction. A rail fence that yesterday meant livestock and boundaries now means cover, obstacle, splinters, and delay. When the order comes to load, the familiar drill sequence returns, but now it has changed flavour. What you practiced under the sun in camp becomes urgent, sharp, and slightly unreal. Tear the cartridge, pour the powder, seat the ball, ram it home, prime, bring the weapon up. Your fingers do the work while part of your mind seems to stand aside and watch. Surprised that this is happening at all? Training does not erase fear. It simply gives fear something useful to hold. The first incoming round may not be the dramatic event you once pictured. It might be a bullet hissing overhead like an angry insect, or an artillery shell passing with a sound so strange your brain refuses to classify it. Men later describe projectiles as buzzing, whining, humming, shrieking, singing. None of the words are comforting. The air itself seems occupied. A round strikes the ground nearby and throws dirt against your trouser leg. The dirt is real enough. So is the sudden cold feeling in your spine. Then someone is hit. This is often the true beginning of battle in your mind. Not the sound, not the smoke, but the first visible collapse of a man you were standing near moments earlier. He may cry out, fall silently, clutch at an arm, drop to his knees, or simply look astonished before disappearing from your line of attention. Nothing in camp quite prepared you for the speed of it. One instant a man is adjusting his cap. The next instant he is no longer participating in the ordinary world. The line wavers inwardly, even if it does not visibly break. You realize with brutal clarity that the bullets are not aimed at some abstract mass called the army. They are coming for bodies. Individual bodies. Yours included. Any remaining trace of parade ground imagination burns away very fast. Orders come rapidly now. Forward. Halt. Dress on the colours. Fire by file. Fire by volley. Lie down. Rise. Change front. Advance to the fence. Hold there. The difficulty is not just obeying, it is hearing through the noise, understanding through the smoke, and keeping your place while every instinct urges you to shrink, duck, or run sideways into the nearest ditch and start a new life as a turnip. The smoke grows. Black powder weapons lay down thick white-grey clouds that drift, pool, and sting the eyes. In some conditions it hangs low across the ground, turning men into half-visible shapes. Sunlight catches in it oddly. Flags emerge and vanish. A line of trees seems solid one moment and ghostly the next. You cough, blink, and squint. The smell is harsh, sulphurous, bitter enough to sit on the tongue. After several volleys it becomes the atmosphere itself. Your musket kicks against your shoulder when you fire. The recoil is not devastating, but under stress it feels more abrupt, more intimate. The barrel warms, ramrod, cartridge, cap, aim, fire. The motions repeat as fast as nerves and training allow. You bite cartridges with a mouth gone dry, powder dust touches your lips, hands darken with residue. The front of the line becomes a workshop of smoke and urgency. There is no elegant way to load faster while afraid. There is only the clumsy speed of necessity. Men shout things that are useful, useless, brave, absurd, or all four at once. Officers try to maintain control, their swords or gestures pointing through haze. Some are splendid under fire, riding or walking with a steadiness that seems almost unnatural. Some discover that courage in camp and courage under live rounds are not identical products. Historians still dispute how many officers actually influenced the action. Once battle noise and smoke swallowed communication, but soldiers paid close attention to the visible conduct of leaders in those first terrifying minutes. The enemy remains partly mysterious even when you are shooting at him. You may see flashes from a tree line, hats above a rise, a battle flag through the haze, men moving behind rails or brush. Often you aim at smoke, motion, or the place where bullets seem to be originating. This is one of battle's bitter little jokes. You've come all this way to fight, and the actual target may still feel vague, hidden, almost imaginary, while his bullets are perfectly concrete. Artillery changes the emotional temperature at once. A battery opening nearby or firing over your head fills the air with concussion. The guns flash, leap, belch smoke, and roll back, crews swarming around them with practiced speed. The blast hits your chest as much as your ears. If enemy artillery answers, shells tear through branches, dirt, fences, nerves. Solid shot can ricochet with frightening unpredictability. Shell fragments make their own cruel geometry. Cannon fire makes the landscape feel breakable. And yet, amid all this, parts of your mind continue doing oddly ordinary things. You notice a torn sleeve. You notice how green the corn still looks. You notice a fence rail shattered into fresh pale splinters. You notice that the man beside you always blinks twice before firing. Small observations survive where grand thinking fails. The brain copes by shrinking its frame. Your fear is not one pure emotion. It is a crowd. There is sharp fear when the first rounds strike near you. There is sick fear when a friend goes down. There is anticipatory fear while reloading, knowing the next second may be the one. There is social fear, too, powerful and quiet, the fear of being seen to fail by the men around you. Many soldiers later admitted that shame and comradeship helped hold lines together as much as patriotism did. Running meant more than self-preservation. It meant being known as the man who ran. For that reason, battle can become an act of collective stubbornness. You stay because others stay. You fire because others fire. The company becomes a kind of frame-holding individual panic in place. When the colours remain upright, They seem almost magical. Men look toward the flag not because cloth can stop bullets, but because visible order feels precious when every sense is under assault. Time behaves strangely. A few minutes stretch into a whole private lifetime. An hour vanishes. Later you may swear a certain exchange of fire lasted forever, only to learn it was brief. Or you may remember a long confused period as one single burst of noise. Battle rearranges the clock. It measures by shock, not by minutes. Your body reacts in ways that surprise you. Hands shake while loading, yet the work still gets done. Hearing narrows, then returns in pieces. The legs feel weak one moment, perfectly serviceable the next. Some men grow intensely calm after the first fright has passed. As if the mind, having accepted danger, becomes colder and more practical. Others remain in a state of raw alarm throughout. There is no single correct human response to rounds passing near your head. A wounded man asking for water can haunt a whole patch of ground. So can one lying silent where you cannot help him. Medics and stretcher bearers, where they can operate, move in dangerous spaces, but many injured remain where they fall until the action shifts or eases. This knowledge presses on every soldier. If you go down, who reaches you, and when? Luck sits over the battlefield like an extra weather system, touching some and missing others for reasons no one can explain. At some point you may be ordered forward. This is a different terror from standing and firing. Advancing under enemy fire forces the body to do what fear specifically forbids. You step over uneven ground, through weeds, over rails, around fallen men, with smoke in your eyes and noise in your chest. The line loses neatness instantly. Men bunch or lag. Dress the line becomes more aspiration than fact. Still you move. The enemy line, once vague, hardens a little through the haze. The space between you and it feels too large and too small at the same time. Or perhaps you are ordered to hold and receive an advance. Waiting can be worse. You see movement building opposite. Flags tilt forward. Smoke puffs along a line. You know what is coming and cannot speed or halt it. There are moments in battle when anticipation is more cruel than impact. Eventually, as first battles so often do, the grand idea of combat gives way to a smaller truth. You are not performing history. You're enduring an event. Glory, if it exists at all, is buried under powder smoke, noise, confusion, and the desperate effort to keep functioning. The shining language of enlistment does not vanish entirely, but it looks very different now, dimmed and dirtied into something harder. When the firing slackens for the first time, whether from order, exhaustion, withdrawal, or local pause, the silence feels wrong, not complete silence, never that. There are still scattered shots, shouted commands, horses, groans, distant guns elsewhere on the field, yet compared with the full storm, the quieter interval feels almost unreal. Your ears ring, your shoulder aches from recoil, your face is streaked with sweat and powder grime. The air smells of burnt powder, churned earth, and torn vegetation. You look around and see the field differently now. Ground that was merely ground in the morning has acquired memory. A fence line has become a place where men fell. A patch of trees has become a source of fear. A dip in the earth has become safety. Briefly. The ordinary world has not disappeared, but it has been marked, and you have been marked with it. Not by some grand speech from the ages, but by the simple, irreversible knowledge of what battle sounds like when it opens, what it smells like when smoke settles in your throat, and what it feels like to discover that courage is not the absence of fear at all. It is the stubborn, trembling act of staying where fear has every reason to send you elsewhere. Once the first shock of battle has passed, you might imagine the rest becomes clearer. It does not. In many ways it becomes harder to understand, because now the field is full of noise, movement, smoke, and broken intentions. You're no longer waiting for combat to begin. You're inside it, and being inside it means living in a world where certainty thins out very quickly. The sound is the first thing that takes command. Not one sound, but layers of them pressing over each other without mercy. Muskets crack in ragged runs, then in massed bursts that roll across the field like tearing cloth. Artillery booms from positions you cannot always see. Shells pass overhead with ugly voices. Officers shout, men answer or fail to hear. Horses scream in a way no one forgets. Somewhere metal strikes wood. Somewhere glass shatters in a farm window. Somewhere a fence goes down with a dry clatter that seems absurdly domestic in the middle of chaos. Your ears cannot sort it all. That is one of battle's quiet cruelties. Training suggests command will move cleanly down the line, but battle scatters speech into fragments. A captain may shout one order while the lieutenant gives another, each trying to correct a problem only partly visible through smoke. A sergeant repeats what he thinks he heard. Half the company obeys, the other half hesitates. The men on the right believe they are advancing. The men on the left think they are holding. The line somehow remains a line through sheer stubborn luck. Smoke thickens with every round fired. It gathers among trees, hangs over low ground, and drifts through open fields in bands that reveal and conceal by turns. A colour-bearer steps into view and then vanishes. A clump of brush looks like enemy skirmishers until the breeze shifts. A friendly regiment may appear where you did not expect one, alarming you for half a heartbeat before a flag or coat saves the moment. Historians still argue about how much any single common soldier truly understood of a battle while it was happening, because individual vision shrank so severely under smoke, stress, and noise. You discover that fear also changes shape once fighting continues. The first fear was sudden and electric. This later fear is more exhausting. It settles into the body like a low current. You reload with it. You wait with it. You glance left and right with it. It never fully leaves. Instead, it becomes the background condition of thought. Like heat on a summer march or cold in a winter camp. A man can function while afraid for quite a long time. That is one of the more sobering things battle teaches. Your hands keep working. They almost have to. Cartridge from the box. Bite. Pour. Ram. Cap. Raise. Fire. The sequence continues until it becomes a rough rhythm, broken by orders, misfires, dropped caps, fouled barrels, and moments of sheer confusion. Black powder residue darkens your fingers and gathers in the weapon's workings. The ramrod feels slick in the palm. Your shoulder grows tender from recoil. Powder grit reaches your tongue and teeth. By now the whole front of your world tastes burnt. The body narrows its attention to what is nearest. You look at the muzzle, the front sight, the patch of smoke ahead, the shoulder of the man next to you. You notice whether he is steady or unravelling. This becomes important. Courage is contagious. But so is panic. A man who begins edging to the rear can create more movement than a dozen shouted speeches can stop. That is why sergeants matter so much here. They step in, curse, shove, realign, and keep the company stitched together with voice and presence. One of the strangest parts of combat is how often you cannot see the enemy clearly. You fire at motion in the brush, flashes from a fence line, or hats glimpsed between tree trunks. The opposing line may be only 50 yards away and still feel oddly abstract behind the smoke. Then, for a second, the haze opens. Faces appear. You see men loading, kneeling, turning, ducking, or running. The abstraction disappears at once. They look distressingly human. Then the smoke closes again, and you're back to fighting shadows that shoot. Battlefields in 1862 often break units apart by terrain alone. A sunken road, a cornfield, a split-rail fence, a ditch, or a patch of timber can swallow alignment. You may enter a stand of trees with your company and emerge with men from 2 other regiments, all trying to look purposeful while privately wondering who exactly is in command. Woods are especially confusing. Sound bounces strangely. Visibility shrinks to flashes between trunks. Smoke hangs under branches. Leaves and bark jump when struck. Every gap in the line feels larger under trees. Cornfields are their own kind of nightmare. Tall stalks rustle and snap around you, hiding movement until it is dangerously near. Leaves brush your sleeves and face with a dry whisper that keeps startling the nerves. Powder smoke catches among the rows. Dirt softens underfoot. When rounds pass through the plants, the field seems to twitch and spit fragments. An agricultural landscape suddenly behaves like a living screen for violence. Open ground is not kinder. There at least you can see farther, but being seen is hardly a comfort. Sunlight may blaze on the grass while bullets cut the air above it. Shell bursts throw dirt and bits of turf upward. Men instinctively stoop, though stooping helps less than the body hopes. Officers urge alignment because open ground punishes disorder quickly. Still, no line under heavy fire remains neat for long. Spaces open, men close them. Someone drops, someone else steps in. The company breathes like an injured animal still trying to keep its shape. Flags matter immensely in this confusion. They are rally point, identity, and direction all at once. A battle flag rising through smoke can steady a whole section of line. If the bearer falls and another man lifts it at once, the gesture has force beyond words. It tells everyone that the regiment still exists, whatever the smoke suggests. Yet the colours also draw enemy attention. To carry them is to carry honour and risk together. Many soldiers later remembered the flags more vividly than the commands, because cloth on a pole could still be understood when everything else dissolved. Noise does strange things to memory. You may not hear your own musket discharge, though you know you fired. A cannon shot might seem to punch the air out of your chest without leaving a full record in the mind. Some men later report a kind of tunnel hearing, where nearby sounds vanished and only the most immediate voices remained. Others remember everything as one massive roar. Both accounts can be true, because battle does not distribute perception equally. Fear of cowardice continues to work on you, not just fear of death, though that is always present, but fear of doing the wrong thing when others are watching. This social pressure can hold men in place when logic alone might not. You know the man beside you sees whether you stay low too long, whether you delay loading, whether you edge backward. He knows the same about you. Mutual observation becomes a kind of improvised discipline. It is not noble in a polished sense, but it is very effective. Then there is confusion about direction. Smoke and terrain can make front and rear feel uncertain. A sudden volley from an unexpected angle jolts every mind toward the possibility of flank attack. Someone shouts that cavalry is coming. Someone else yells that friendly troops are firing into you by mistake. Such things do happen. Battle in this era is full of partial information, and partial information breeds terrible confidence. A rumour can run through a regiment faster than a courier because rumour asks no permission. When ammunition begins to run low in part of the line, anxiety rises at once. Cartridge boxes are checked again and again. Men count by feel. Officers send runners rearward. Boxes may arrive, or not, or arrive for the wrong unit in the wrong place. Logistics in battle are often glorified afterward because admitting the truth sounds too fragile. The truth is that supply under fire depends on brave, hurried men carrying awkward weight into a world where anything can interrupt them. You also learn how quickly fatigue joins fear. Firing, loading, standing, shouting, moving, and bracing under tension drain the body with shocking speed, mouth dry, shoulder bruised, hands blackened, knees trembling slightly. You keep going because there is no graceful pause available. A man can feel both intensely alive and close to collapse within the same minute. Sweat cools strangely under powder smoke. The face feels hot while fingers feel numb. Breathing becomes work. Wounded men continue shaping the field around you. Some crawl back unaided, some call for stretcher bearers. Some sit in stunned silence, pressing a hand to bloodied cloth as if pressure alone might restore the morning. A friend may be hit and still speak, which is somehow more disturbing than silence. You want to help, but the line demands you remain. This is one of battle's harshest disciplines. Compassion must wait, or appear only in fragments. A canteen passed, an arm dragged a few feet, a shout to someone behind. Artillery can return at any moment to make all of this worse. Shells bursting nearby shower dirt and fragments. Case shot or canister at closer range turns the air into a place you do not want to imagine too clearly. The instinct to lie flat becomes nearly irresistible. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes the order is to stand. Obedience then feels less like principle, and more like a duel between training and terror. Soldiers later described cannon fire with a special dread, not because musketry was gentle, but because artillery seemed to reach everywhere at once and with terrible impersonality, and yet even here, odd scraps of calm can appear. A man cracks a joke while ramming home a cartridge. Another adjusts his cap with absurd care. Someone notices a ripe apple hanging untouched in a nearby tree. Human beings are inconveniently normal even under extreme conditions. That normality can be a mercy. It keeps the mind from splitting under the pressure of uninterrupted fear. The chain of command, so precise on paper, becomes more human by the minute. Officers are wounded, separated, or disoriented. Junior leaders take over. A corporal finds himself directing men because no one else is standing nearby with authority left intact. Decisions shrink from grand strategy to immediate necessity. Hold this fence to move to that rise. Support the men in the orchard. Fall back to the road. The whole battle may hinge, in your tiny portion of it, on whether a handful of men understand one shouted sentence. This is why later recollections can differ so wildly. One soldier remembers a clear advance. Another remembers confusion and smoke. One remembers steady officers. Another recalls nobody seeming in charge. One recalls the enemy close enough to see expressions. Another remembers firing blind most of the day. These differences do not always cancel each other. They reveal what battle really was, not a single shared movie, but thousands of partial experiences colliding on the same ground. At some point the line may surge forward with sudden confidence because the enemy appears to give way. Cheers rise. Men step faster. Adrenaline flares. Then a fresh volley crashes from somewhere hidden, and the advance checks at once, the whole company dipping under the shock like grain in a gust. Momentum in battle is fragile. So is courage. Both can revive quickly. Both can vanish just as fast. When the struggle finally loosens, whether by local victory, withdrawal, darkness, or sheer exhaustion, you do not emerge feeling triumphant in any simple way. You emerge bewildered, ears ringing, body shaking with delayed reaction, mind struggling to sort what happened from what merely seemed to happen. Smoke thins into the evening air, voices regain shape. The ground under your boots looks ordinary again, and yet completely altered. Broken branches, torn fences, spent cartridges, scattered gear, and dark patches in the grass provide a new map written over the old one. You realize then that battle is not a contest of clear scenes and noble poses. It is confusion endured in company. It is the hard labor of keeping hold of yourself while sound, smoke, fear, and incomplete knowledge try to tear that self apart. You may still stand in line, still carry the same musket, still wear the same wool. But the inside of your mind has learned something irreversible. War is not only danger, it is bewilderment. Repeated until bewilderment becomes its own form of experience. After the firing eases, the battlefield does not become peaceful. It becomes busy in a different, grimmer way. The noise changes first. The great tearing crash of volleys gives way to scattered shots, shouted names, wagon wheels, groans, hooves, and the hurried voices of men trying to find the living among the fallen. Smoke still drifts low in places, carrying that bitter burnt smell that settles into your throat and stays there. The ground looks torn open in patches, trampled flat in others, and strangely unchanged just a few steps away. Grass still bends in the wind. Trees still stand. A fence rail still catches the last light. War is rude enough to happen in ordinary settings and leave parts of them looking almost untouched. You begin to understand how much luck governs everything after a fight. Skill matters, endurance matters, courage matters. Then luck leans over them all with its own cold expression. Where a bullet struck, how deeply, whether it hit bone, whether the bleeding is seen in time, whether stretcher bearers can reach that patch of ground, whether a surgeon is nearby, sober, capable, rested, and supplied, whether the road behind the lines is passable, whether night is coming too fast. A man's future can turn on details so small they feel insulting. The wounded lie where they fell until someone reaches them, and that waiting is its own misery. Some men call steadily for water, for a friend, for a mother, for no one in particular. Some try to rise and fail. Some sit with stunned stillness, pressing a hand over a wound as if firmness alone can hold life in place. Others seem oddly calm, speaking in practical tones about being hit, as if discussing a torn boot. Shock does curious things to speech. A man may chatter, another may go silent, another may seem embarrassed, as though being wounded has caused inconvenience to others. You move among sights that would have seemed unimaginable not long ago and now arrive all at once. A hat with no owner beside it, a musket dropped in weeds, a canteen leaking into dirt, torn cloth, blood-darkening wool. A man asking for help in a voice so conversational it is almost more disturbing than a scream. This is where the battlefield becomes personal in a new way. During the fight, fear kept your attention moving. Afterward, details stand still long enough to be absorbed. Stretcher work is brutally hard. 2 men lift, carry, step around holes, over rails, through mud, under fading light, all while trying not to worsen pain they cannot properly treat anyway. Improvised stretchers appear too, made from blankets and poles, doors, fence rails, anything that will bear weight for a while. Paths to the rear become crowded with this traffic of suffering. Mud grabs at boots, wheels sink, horses shy at smells and confusion. Every yard feels longer than it should. The field hospitals are usually set up in whatever sheltered place can be found behind the lines. A farmhouse, a barn, a church, a schoolhouse, a cluster of tents, even open ground under trees if nothing else is available. You do not arrive at anything resembling a modern hospital. You arrive at urgency improvised, lantern light, tables, blankets, water buckets, piles of knapsacks and coats, men waiting on the floor, on benches, on straw, on bare boards, on the earth itself. Surgeons move fast because they have to. There are too many patients and not enough hours. The smell hits you before the full sight does. Blood, sweat, wet wool, mud, spirits, smoke, and the metallic edge of surgical instruments all mix in the air. Add to that the smell of fear, if such a thing can be said to exist, and it does. A crowded aid station has an atmosphere of concentrated human distress that feels almost physical against the skin. It clings to the back of the throat. Men later remembered hospital smells with astonishing clarity because smell ignores the mind's efforts to soften memory. Civil War medicine in 1862 is more competent than later legend sometimes allows. But competence has harsh limits. Surgeons understand bones, bullets, shock, and the need to act quickly in many cases. They use anesthesia such as chloroform or ether far more often than popular myth once suggested. Historians still push back against the old idea that operations were commonly done with no pain relief at all, because in many organised surgical settings anesthesia was available and used. The real horror was not simple barbarism, it was scale, speed, infection risk, and the overwhelming number of badly damaged bodies. You wait your turn if you can wait. Triage, though not always called that in the modern way, is practiced out of necessity. Men with minor wounds may be set aside. Men with severe but treatable injuries are moved forward. Men judged beyond saving may receive comfort rather than intervention. This is one of the cruelest parts of battlefield medicine. Somebody must decide where effort has a chance. Those decisions are made quickly, in exhaustion, under pressure, often with incomplete information. A surgeon's face after long hours tells its own story. If your wound is in the arm or leg and the bone is shattered, the word everyone fears may soon appear. Amputation. It is the most famous image of Civil War surgery for good reason, though fame has turned it into caricature. Surgeons do not remove limbs out of casual enthusiasm. They do it because mini-balls and other projectiles can smash bone terribly, leaving damage difficult to repair with the tools and conditions of the time. Infection, gangrene, and continued hemorrhage loom over every delay. A clean, fast amputation may offer the best hope of survival, bleak as that hope sounds. The procedure, when it happens, is swift by design. Speed as kindness when pain, blood loss, and long lines of waiting men fill the room. Instruments are laid out, assistants hold and help. If anesthesia is available and effective, You drift under with the room's noise blurring at the edges. If not enough is available, or the circumstances are chaotic, suffering sharpens accordingly. The saw has become a symbol in memory because its sound is unforgettable. But it is only one part of a whole process driven by pressure, experience, and desperate necessity. Not every wound means surgery. Many men are bandaged, probed, cleaned as best conditions allow, and laid out to recover or worsen. Chest wounds are especially feared. Abdominal wounds too. Infections lurk behind almost every case once the immediate danger passes. Water may be scarce, dressings may run low. Hands and tools are not sterilized according to knowledge that medicine will only develop fully later. Surgeons do wash, wipe, and attempt cleanliness to varying degrees, but they lack the modern germ theory framework that would transform practice. This means a man who survives the field and survives surgery still faces days of uncertainty. Nurses and attendants matter enormously. In some hospitals, these include male orderlies, convalescent soldiers, civilian volunteers, religious workers, and women who came into military medical service through sheer determination and need. They fetch water, hold lanterns, prepare food, clean wounds, write letters, change bedding, steady frightened men, and absorb the endless practical work that keeps a hospital from collapsing into complete disorder. Their labour is less celebrated in battle paintings, but without it the whole system would fail even faster than it did. Water becomes medicine, comfort, and currency. A sip to wet a mouth, a cloth to wipe a face, a basin to rinse hands or instruments. A cup passed to a man too weak to lift his own head. The simple act of giving water can become almost sacred in such conditions. So can lifting a body slightly, adjusting a blanket, finding a lost letter in a coat pocket, or writing down a name correctly. Tiny acts of order feel enormous when pain has reduced a man's universe to one table or pallet. The wounded themselves form a society of chance. Men from different regiments lie side by side, their old distinctions temporarily softened by shared vulnerability. A farmer from Ohio, a clerk from Virginia, an immigrant labourer from New York, a schoolteacher from Georgia, all may occupy the same room of groans, whispers, and lantern glow. War divides by uniform, but suffering has little use for neat categories. A wounded enemy captured after battle may receive treatment alongside the men who were firing at him only hours earlier. This did happen, and it could be handled with rough decency or rougher feeling depending on the place, the hour, and the people involved. One quirky detail from wartime hospitals is how often ordinary domestic items took on astonishing value. A pillow, a spoon, a bit of preserved fruit, a candle stub, a newspaper to fold under a head, a clean shirt to cut into bandages. The grand machinery of armies often depended, in the end, on households turned inside out and carried into war piecemeal. Letters become especially important here. A wounded man may ask someone to write home for him. The dictated message is often calmer than the body producing it. Men soften the truth for families. Slightly wounded may cover a great deal. Comfortable may mean only that the pain is bearable for the moment. Some write practical instructions about pay, crops, debts, or children, as if ordinary life can still be managed by ink from a cot. Others send locks of hair, rings, Bibles, or final words to loved ones they know they may never see again. There is immense tenderness in these moments, and an equal amount of restraint. You also see how morale shifts with every small sign. A surgeon saying the wound is clean, a fever breaking, a friend recognised across the room, a chaplain reading softly at the bedside, a rumour that the army held the field, a rumour that wagons are coming, a rumour that the hospital may need to move. Hope and dread alternate so quickly they almost become one sensation. Night in a wartime hospital is its own world. Lanterns throw weak yellow circles over boards, faces, and hanging coats. Shadows move on walls. Men mutter in sleep or delirium. Someone calls out from a dream. Someone prays in a whisper. Somewhere a saw or instrument tray clinks again, because the work has not stopped simply because the sun has gone. Outside, wagons still arrive. Hooves stamp. Orderlies confer in low voices. The darkness softens edges but not realities. Pain is everywhere, but it is not uniform. A head wound may leave a man quiet and distant. A shattered limb may produce outcries that rise and fall with each movement. Fever creates its own fevered speech, a drifting confusion in which home, battle, church, and childhood all mix together. The mind under suffering reaches for strange anchors. Men ask for mothers, wives, brothers, old rooms, fields, streams, and doors from childhood houses. Memory becomes a place to lie down when the body no longer can. There is also survival guilt. Though the phrase itself belongs to a later vocabulary, you feel it in quieter ways. Why did one man die in the field while another with a worse-looking coat tear reaches the hospital intact? Why did a ball pass through flesh here and through bone there? Why are you standing while he is carried? Soldiers did not need modern language to recognize the unfairness of chance. They lived inside it. Scholars continue to debate how much Civil War medical practice should be seen as a story of horror versus a story of adaptation under impossible conditions. Both views contain truth. The suffering was enormous. The results were often grim. Yet surgeons and nurses also learned, organized, recorded cases, improved transport in some armies, and worked with dedication under crushing burdens. To call the system merely primitive misses the hard competence many developed. To call it efficient misses the blood, mud, delay, shortage, and infection that haunted every ward. By the time dawn or another day arrives, the hospital has already become a place where lives divide. Some men improve enough to hope for transport farther from the front. Some worsen quietly, despite every effort. Some lose limbs and begin the slow, awful task of imagining a different future. Some die with little ceremony because the room is too full and time is too scarce for elaborate mourning. Death in such places can be solemn, hurried, tender, lonely, or all four at once. And for those who remain alive, the war changes shape again. It is no longer only marching, firing, and holding position under smoke. It is dressings, fever checks, weak broth, flies in warm weather, the scrape of chair legs on boards, the touch of bandages, the ache of healing flesh, and the long, uncertain arithmetic of whether luck has finished with you or only paused. You lie there with the smell of blood and soap and damp linen in the air, listening to low voices and distant wheels, and you realize that battle does not end when the guns fall quiet. It keeps moving through bodies for days, weeks, and sometimes for the rest of a life. Away from the firing line is what keeps you steady is often not discipline alone, and not even food or sleep, though both matter dearly. It is the thread that still ties you to a world beyond tents, roads, and smoke. In 1862, that thread is made of paper, prayer, rumour, memory, and the small habits a man builds when too much rests on luck. A soldier can live for days on poor rations and stubbornness, but he lives inwardly on something else as well. He needs signs that he still belongs to a human life wider than the army. Mail Day proves it. Few moments in camp stir such quick electricity. Men who have looked half asleep all morning suddenly become alert when the post arrives. Heads lift. Conversations stop in mid-sentence. A clerk, officer, or orderly begins calling names, and each name lands differently. Some men grin before they even take the letter. Some try to act calm and fail. Some hear nothing and stare at the ground as though the earth itself has become personally rude. A letter from home is never only a letter. It is a room reopened. You hold the folded paper and recognize the hand before you read a word. That alone can tighten your chest. The page may smell faintly of a drawer, lamp oil, flour, tobacco, soap, or perfume, if someone at home was generous enough to leave a trace. The edges soften with handling, ink pools in familiar strokes. For a few minutes the whole coarse machinery of camp life recedes, and the voice of one person crosses all that distance to reach you. You read slowly or quickly, depending on temperament, but almost everyone reads twice. The first time for news, the second time for presents. How is the corn? Has the baby started walking? Did the roof get mended? Is your brother still coughing? Did the town hold a rally? Has anyone heard from a cousin serving elsewhere? Which neighbours ask after you, and which annoyingly enough, seem too busy with their own lives. Domestic facts can seem unbearably precious when you are surrounded by wool, mud, and military noise. Many letters carry practical requests. Send money if paid, write sooner, tell us where you are if allowed. Are you eating enough? Do you still have the socks we sent? Such questions may sound simple, but they carry affection in every line. Some letters also carry restraint. Families avoid speaking their worst fears too plainly. A mother may write briskly about chores because if she writes honestly about dread, the page would dissolve under her hand. A wife may mention weather and church attendance because saying, "I wake at night wondering if you're alive," would tear the whole letter open. You answer when you can. Writing in camp is a small battle against interruption. You find a box, barrel, knapsack, knee, or patch of ground to serve as desk. Flies land. Smoke drifts. Someone nearby argues about rations. Another man hums while cleaning his musket. Yet inside that disorder you bend over paper with intense care, trying to make neat lines despite cramped fingers and poor ink. The scratch of pen on paper sounds unusually intimate in camp, as though civilization has momentarily returned in miniature. What do you say? Not always the full truth. Soldiers soften reality just as families do. You write that you are well, or tolerably well, when perhaps you're thin, sore, and exhausted. You describe camp in manageable pieces, the weather, the march, the quality of coffee with suitable sarcasm. You avoid details that would frighten those at home unless necessity forces your hand. Men often became skilled editors of their own suffering. This was kindness, pride, and self-protection all braided together. Illiteracy changes the process but does not end it. Men who cannot write ask friends to compose letters for them. That creates scenes of plain, deep feeling. One soldier dictates while another, more practiced with pen and spelling, gives the words shape. Tell Mother I'm in good health. Tell Sarah I received the shirt and thank her kindly. Tell them not to trouble on my account. The scribe may polish the phrasing a little, but the heart of it remains. Sometimes the writer grows more emotional than the man dictating. Paper has a way of revealing things voice alone can hide. Receiving no letter is its own hardship. Silence from home breeds quick speculation. Did the letter go astray? Is the post delayed? Is someone ill? Has something happened they do not wish to write? An army teaches patience by force, yet nothing tests patience like waiting for a letter that should already have come. Men pretend indifference, then spend the evening glancing toward the road, as if the post might reconsider itself. News from newspapers adds another layer, though it is a rough and often unreliable comfort. Newspapers circulate through camp until they are worn thin, passed hand to hand, read aloud beside fires, and argued over with fierce conviction. They bring reports of battles, speeches, politics, promotions, and casualty lists. They also bring rumour dressed in respectable type. One paper declares victory, another calls the same event a muddle. One praises a general as genius, another hints he is a fool with epaulets. Soldiers learn to read papers with appetite and suspicion in equal measure. Rumour, of course, flourishes even when print is absent. In fact, rumour thrives best where certainty is scarce. A regiment nearby is said to be moving tomorrow. Pay is said to be coming. The war is said to be nearly over. Reinforcements are said to have arrived. A commander is said to have resigned, been dismissed, been promoted, been drunk, been brilliant, or all four before supper. Camp rumour spreads with astonishing speed because it satisfies a deep hunger. Men want pattern. They want to know what story they are living inside. In the absence of fact, the mind hires gossip to do the work. Faith offers pattern of a different kind. In camp and on campaign, religion can sharpen rather than fade. You see it in the man who reads a pocket Bible by lantern light, lips moving softly. You hear it in prayer meetings after dark, where hymns rise low and steady between tents. You feel it in the hush that can settle over a rough group of men when a chaplain speaks plainly about fear, death, mercy, and home. Battle has a way of stripping away decorative belief and leaving only what a man truly leans on. Not every soldier becomes more devout. Some grow doubtful, bitter or quietly angry with heaven. Others become more serious in practice without turning outwardly pious. Historians still debate how deeply wartime revivals changed individual soldiers versus simply giving public form to feelings already present. Yet there is no question that prayer, scripture, hymn singing, and religious conversation fill many corners of army life. A man facing uncertainty reaches for whatever language helps him bear it. Prayer in camp is not always formal. Sometimes it is a group gathered by a fire. Sometimes it's a man sitting alone on a log at dusk, cap in his hands, saying little. Sometimes it's a sentence muttered before sleep. Sometimes it's the quick inward plea that rises when artillery begins. The polished difference between church devotion and battlefield devotion matters less than later people imagine. In wartime, prayer can become as immediate as thirst. Homesickness runs through all this like an underground stream. It is not always dramatic. Often it comes disguised as irritation, fatigue, or sudden silence. A smell of apples may awaken memories of autumn at home. The creak of wagon wheels at dusk may sound like a farm gate. A song sung badly in camp may still recall a parlour, a porch, a sister at the piano, a father keeping time with one finger on the table. The mind does not always miss home in grand pictures. It misses a lamp, a dish, a patch of shade, the exact knock of a familiar step. The seasons sharpen homesickness in different ways. Spring reminds you of planting. Summer brings thoughts of haying, gardens, and long light on fields. Autumn calls up harvest smells, cider, wood smoke, and home kitchens. Winter reaches deeper. Cold fingers around a tin cup can make you remember the heat of a stove with almost painful precision. Snow on camp roofs is not the same as snow falling outside your own window. One belongs to discomfort, the other belongs to memory. Men make small private rituals to steady themselves. That is one of the most human features of soldier life. A man may fold and unfold the same letter before sleep. Another may clean his weapon in exactly the same order each evening. Another touches a ring on a string beneath his shirt. Another keeps a lock of hair wrapped in cloth. Another says the same prayer before marching. Another insists on placing his boots a certain way. These habits may look trivial, but they offer shape when larger structures fail. Superstitions bloom naturally in such soil. A particular coin feels lucky. A Bible in the breast pocket is believed to guard the heart. A photograph tucked near the chest becomes more than paper. Some men trust charms sent from home. Others avoid speaking too confidently before battle, fearing to tempt fate. A hat worn on one fortunate day becomes impossible to discard. Rational minds can laugh at this in daylight. Yet under stress, many soldiers cling to patterns that feel protective, even when they know better. Fear is practical like that. One quirky feature of army life is how objects become emotionally enlarged. A small cake from home, by the time it reaches camp, may be dry, cracked, and shared in crumbs. Yet those crumbs can produce a silence of gratitude around a fire. A knitted mitten with one thumb slightly crooked may be admired like treasure. A little vial of cologne or sachet tucked into a letter can transform a tent for 5 seconds, filling it with the scent of another world. Men pass such things around reverently, like pilgrims receiving proof that gentleness still exists. Friendship in the ranks supports the heart as much as mail or prayer. Soldiers learn one another's moods. They know who grows quiet when anxious, who talks too much when frightened, who needs a joke, who needs to be left alone, who benefits from a cup of coffee placed wordlessly beside him. Companionship is not always sentimental. Sometimes it is a blanket shared, a letter read aloud, a place held in line, or the simple refusal to let a comrade sit alone too long with dark thoughts. Emotional life in camp can be understated, but it is rarely absent. Death shadows these bonds, which is why memory work begins early. Men carry names in their heads. They preserve last messages. They note where someone was buried if they can. They keep photographs, letters, testaments, and bits of gear for those who will not return. The living become custodians for the absent in 100 quiet ways. This responsibility deepens the emotional atmosphere of camp beyond what outsiders often picture. Soldier life is not only rough humour and hard bread, it is also remembrance in real time. At night, these inward matters feel strongest. The camp settles. Fires burn low. Voices soften. Somewhere nearby, someone reads by lantern glow. Somewhere else, a hymn begins without announcement and fades after a verse or two. The smell of smoke and damp canvas hangs in the air. Your blanket scratches at the chin. The ground beneath you is still hard, but fatigue softens its complaint. In the dark, thoughts travel farther. You think of homes lit by lamplight, of people moving through familiar rooms, of tasks continuing without you. And still, despite longing, uncertainty, and the whole weariness of war, those fragile ties do their work. A page in a known hand, a prayer whispered into cold air, a rumour laughed at and discarded, a charm pressed in the palm, a friend nudging a cup of coffee your way without asking questions. These things do not end fear or loneliness. They make them livable. They remind you that beneath the uniform, beneath the powder grime, beneath all the routines of soldiering, you remain a person joined to other persons by memory, affection, and hope, stubborn enough to survive on paper. By the end of 1862, you're still recognisably yourself, but only in the way a weathered building is still the same structure after a hard season. The frame remains. The surfaces have changed. War has worked on you with repetition, fatigue, fear, hunger, noise, and long stretches of waiting in between sudden moments that split life cleanly into what you knew and what you know now. You do not wake one morning and announce that you have become older. The aging happens quietly. It settles into the face, the posture, the voice, and the way the mind now measures the world. You notice it first in your reactions. A new recruit arriving with bright eyes and polished confidence can seem almost touching. You do not mock him out loud, at least not always, but you hear something in his tone that no longer fits your own mouth. He speaks of campaigns as though they move in straight lines. He imagines battle as a test with clear results. He packs too much, asks too many eager questions, and still believes a good meal is a reasonable expectation rather than a fortunate interruption. None of this makes him foolish. It simply means he has not yet been instructed by reality. Your own body carries that instruction plainly. You move with more economy now, less wasted motion, more immediate judgment about where to sit, when to drink, how to shift a load, which clouds mean nuisance and which mean trouble. Your hands know leather, iron, wool, mud, and powder in ways they never did before. Your shoulders have learned the exact pressure of straps. Your feet, if they could write memoirs, would likely demand revenge. The army has taken your body and turned it into a collection of practical habits. Your face changes too, not always dramatically, but enough for a family member to notice. The skin darkened by sun and wind, the eyes a little more reserved, the mouth quicker to flatten at grand talk. Some soldiers grow beards from convenience, fashion, or neglect, and the facial hair itself can make a man seem suddenly older. Yet it is not whiskers that matter most. It is expression. You begin to look like someone who waits without fidgeting, because he's had too much practice, or also alters your relationship with time. Civilian life once divided itself by seasons, markets, church days, work, and family routines. Soldier time divides itself differently, by marches, by mail arrivals, by inspections, by pay delays, by battles remembered according to terrain, weather, and sound. Days of boredom can blur together until one violent hour burns itself into memory with a precision the calmer days never achieve. You might forget the date of a march and remember exactly how the fog looked over a creek when guns opened nearby. This new sense of time affects your ideas about the future. Early confidence in a quick ending has thinned. Whatever side you fight for, the easy illusions have been marched out of you. A war of this size does not simply dissolve because men wish it to. Newspapers may continue promising much. Politicians may continue speaking in firm tones. You now know that roads are long, commanders are flawed, supply is uncertain, and battle rarely behaves according to the hopes arranged for it in advance. Historians still debate when most soldiers fully accepted that the war would be long, but by late 1862, many had certainly learned not to trust cheerful predictions. You become, in that sense, Harder to impress? Not joyless. Exactly. Just filtered. You listen for the practical side of things. How much food? How many wagons? What road? Which ford? Are there shoes? Is the water fit to drink? Where is the hospital? This narrowing toward the practical is not a loss of idealism alone. It is a survival adjustment. Lofty causes may still matter deeply to you, but they now live beside harder questions that cannot be brushed aside by flag waving. Your view of leadership changes as well. At the start, rank may have seemed almost mystical. A well-dressed officer on horseback looked like authority embodied. After a year's hard schooling, you know authority can be brave, foolish, vain, competent, drunk, calm, confused, or accidentally all of these within a single afternoon. You watch officers more carefully now. Does he keep his head under pressure? Does he know the road? Does he care whether rations arrived? Does he expose men needlessly? Does he tell the truth about what can be done? Soldiers become skilled judges of leadership because poor judgment in a superior is not an abstract defect. It lands directly on your back, stomach, and chances of remaining alive. Comradeship deepens into something less sentimental and more durable. You may not speak warmly every day. In fact, you may argue over cards, coffee, politics, tent space, or whose turn it is to fetch water. Yet beneath all that lies a bond built from shared weather, shared fear, and the repeated experience of being present when another man is tired, hungry, anxious, or wounded. The company becomes a rough family of circumstance, not always affectionate, often sarcastic, but real. A man who has stood beside you under fire occupies a different chamber of respect from one who merely talks well by a stove. Loss changes this comradeship too. Empty spaces appear in lines and around fires. A joke stops existing because the man who always made it is gone. A tin cup remains unclaimed. A blanket roll lies beside other gear until someone finally gathers it. The dead do not leave at once in the emotional sense. They linger in habits, sayings, and absences. Memory in camp is practical. Men recall where someone sat, how he laughed, what he carried, how he wrote home, how he cursed the coffee. Grief rarely arrives dressed for ceremony. It arrives while cleaning a musket or reaching automatically for a person no longer there. This is one of the hardest changes in you by year's end. Death has become both more ordinary and more personal. Not ordinary in the sense of unimportant. Ordinary in the sense of recurring, expected, folded into the structure of military life. That is a sobering transformation. At home, death often came with family, ritual, and locality. In the army it may come on a roadside, in a field hospital, in a camp swept by sickness, in a skirmish too small for newspapers to notice. You learn how thin the line is between one more mourning and none, and yet you go on living among ordinary things. That is part of the strange education of 1862. Men die, and somebody still has to boil coffee. A burial detail returns, and somebody still complains about the bread. Letters arrive. Socks need mending. A corporal gets angry about tent order. Rain starts. Fires smoke badly. Laughter appears where it seems almost improper, then proves necessary. Life continues not because suffering is shallow, but because life insists. Your politics may also sharpen or change. For some Union soldiers, the war's meaning broadens as slavery becomes more openly central to the conflict, and emancipation enters military and political reality with greater force toward the end of the year. For some Confederate soldiers, the war's burdens intensify commitments to home defense and independence, or expose strains between ideals and hardship. Not every soldier grows more reflective. Some grow more fixed in old beliefs, some grow more uncertain. But it is difficult to spend 1862 in uniform without sensing that the war is larger and more morally tangled than recruiting songs suggested. You become better at reading men. This skill arrives quietly. You know the look of a comrade trying to hide illness. You know when homesickness is coming over someone like weather. You know which laughter is genuine and which means a man is fraying a little at the edges. You can often tell by the way a soldier packs in silence whether he expects a short march, a hard fight, or a bad night. Armies compress human behaviour into close quarters. Given enough time, anyone observant becomes a student of mood. You also acquire a certain dry humour, because without it the absurdities of military life would become intolerable. Humour in camp is not decoration. It is pressure relief. Men joke about rations, officers, weather, mules, hardtack, old boots, bad roads, and the astonishing ability of government supply to fail at the exact wrong moment. A soldier who can laugh while wet, hungry, and muddy possesses a very serviceable form of courage. One quirky truth about seasoned troops is how quickly they can turn discomfort into a running joke. As if naming misery politely keeps it from settling too deeply in the bones, home itself has changed in your imagination. It is no longer merely the place you left. It has become an inward country built from letters, smells remembered, small objects carried, and scenes replayed in the mind before sleep. You do not romanticize every part of it. You remember debts, chores, old frustrations, the limits and irritations of ordinary life. Yet even those flaws now feel tender. To miss a place fully is to miss its imperfections too. The loose gate, the damp corner by the shed, the neighbour who talks too long, the dog that barked at nothing. Absence gives strange gifts to memory. At the same time, there is a possibility you do not speak often. The possibility that home may not fit you exactly if you reach it again. War teaches habits that may not lay down easily. Waking at noise, assessing roads and weather at a glance, eating quickly, keeping private thoughts closer, measuring strangers by usefulness. These traits serve you now. Whether they will serve in peace is a quieter question, one not easily answered in 1862. By the year's end, you have also seen how much of soldiering lies outside battle. Outsiders may picture only firing lines and dramatic charges. You know better. Soldier life is also sickness, waiting, mending, walking, writing, carrying, cooking, cleaning, and enduring the weather's daily opinions. It is discipline in small things. It is learning to function while uncomfortable. It is discovering that boredom and terror can live in the same week, even the same day. This knowledge makes you less theatrical, perhaps, but more truthful. You're not fearless now. That would be too simple and mostly false. If anything, you understand fear more clearly. You know how it sounds in breathing, how it feels in the fingers, how it works on the stomach, how it can sit quietly behind the eyes and still permit useful action. Courage has lost its decorative feathers. It now looks like staying in line, lifting a stretcher, sharing water, writing a letter for a wounded friend, standing post in bitter weather, or getting up when the march starts again and your body's already tired from the day before. This year has also taught you that identity in war is both larger and smaller than you expected. Larger because you are part of an army, a cause, a nation in convulsion. Smaller because daily life reduces you to concrete tasks that must be done, whether history notices or not. Clean the weapon, boil the coffee, keep your feet sound, watch the road, find your company and smoke, hold steady. These simple acts become the true grammar of soldier life. As winter edges in and camps settle into colder rhythms, the air changes again. Smoke lies lower, breath clouds in the morning, wool feels heavier, more necessary. The ground hardens by degrees. Men huddle closer to fires and speak with that particular tired intimacy that cold encourages. Somewhere nearby, someone reads a letter again under weak light. Somewhere else, a voice drifts through camp in song. Not loud, just enough to reach the next tent. The year has worn everyone down, but it has also bound them into a shared texture of endurance. And you, standing or sitting among them, know that 1862 has given you no clean conclusions. It has stripped away certain illusions and replaced them with rougher truths. War is grand in speeches and stubborn in practice. Men are brave and petty, generous and selfish, disciplined and ridiculous, often within the same hour. Leadership matters. Luck matters more than anyone likes to admit. Home can be carried in a pocket. Fear can live beside duty. Survival is never entirely earned. Though effort claims its part, the night deepens. The fire settles into red coals. Smoke and cold air meet above the camp in a thin grey veil. Boots stand near the warmth, muskets rest close at hand, blankets wait, faces lit by the last glow seem older than they should, yet still undeniably human, still capable of laughter, prayer, complaint, and hope. You pull your coat tighter, feel the rough cloth against your skin, and understand with a calm sobriety that this year has not turned you into a legend. It has turned you into a soldier, which is a harder, sadder, and more real thing to be. The cold eases around the edges of the fire as the camp grows quieter, and now the harder facts of the year can soften for a little while. You let the sounds settle into a calmer pattern. A low murmur from one tent, a quiet footstep on packed ground, the faint clink of a cup being set aside. Overhead, the night feels wide and patient, stretching above canvas, chimneys of smoke, and rows of sleeping men. You breathe in the smell of wood smoke, wool, and winter air, and the world grows smaller in a comforting way. The musket nearby is only an object now, resting in stillness. The road is dark and empty for the moment. The fields beyond the camp lie under shadow, no longer asking anything of tired feet. Even memory seems to lower its voice. Around you, men settle into blankets and thoughts and dreams they will not fully remember by morning. Some hold letters close, some whisper a final prayer, some simply sleep at once, carried down by exhaustion into a deep, blank quiet. The fire gives a last gentle crackle, then another, as if speaking softly to itself. And you, at last, do not need to march or load or answer any command. You only rest here in the hush, feeling the weight leave your shoulders for a little while. The night keeps watch. The cold stays outside the circle of warmth. Your breathing slows. The camp fades into darkness, one peaceful sound at a time, until there is almost nothing left but stillness, and the soft, steady feeling of finally being allowed to drift.